Good morning. I am Mayor Donald T. Lopez, Village of Los Ranchos de Albuquerque. I want to welcome our Village of Los Ranchos staff, members of the governing body, to the Board of Trustees as the Board of Finance Budget Working Session. It is Monday, April 3rd, 2023. The time is 8:30. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to do the roll call next. Mayor Pro Tem, Trustee Pacheco.
Present.
Trustee Lewis.
Yes.
Trustee Benavides is excused. Trustee Benavides met with Administrator Simon and CFO Tammy Silva last week. CFO Tammy Silva will be providing his comments when we get to the appropriate items on the budget. Trustee Radnovich is not here yet. Item 3 is approval of the agenda. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I need a second.
I'll second.
Mayor Pro Tem, Trustee Pacheco.
Yes.
Trustee Lewis.
Yes.
Trustee Radnovich is not here. Item 4, discussion of the FY 23-24 preliminary budget. CFO Tammy Silva and Administrator Ann Simon will begin the budget review. If the trustees have questions or would like to comment at any point, please do so, as this is a working session. We will set aside time for any public comment, if there is, specific to the preliminary budget at the end of this session. We will then answer any questions at that time. Let's begin with CFO Tammy Silva and Administrator Ann Simon.
Good morning, Mayor, Trustees. Thank you very much. I want to start by just sending out an apology from our treasurer. He was unable to make it. He was going to make it when it was on Friday, but when it got changed, it is his quarter end close, and they closed today, so he was unable to make that, and he wanted me to pass that along. But he does have the packet that we're reviewing so that he has the information in front of him, and any changes that we make after this meeting, I will communicate to him as well. So I want to go ahead and let you know. But before you is the interim budget for fiscal year 2024, and you have 2 items in front of you. And the first one, the general fund comparison, is where we're going to start. We have a little bit of an agenda that we want to go through, specifically some items that are new for this next fiscal year. And so I will start there. Please let me know at any point if you have questions about it, and we can stop and discuss that. But to start, we're going to start with the general fund revenue, and that is on page 1 of 7 of the general fund comparison. And I want to bring your attention to line items, the second and third line items that are for GRT tax. The reason why I want to bring your attention here is because you will see in column E, increase, decrease, quite a big drop. And the reason for that is because we would like to propose a reallocation of GRT starting in fiscal year 24. Right now, 5% of our GRT goes into the road fund and 95% goes into the general fund. Excuse me. However, this next fiscal year and the following several fiscal years, we are asking for quite a large sum of money to complete our 4th Street project. We're asking for $27 million. And for that road project, we have to have a match of $3.5 million. Over 4 fiscal years. So by fiscal year 26, we have to have 1.1 million to show our match, and then fiscal year 28 and 29, we need additional matches. And so because of that, and the other road projects that we propose when we go out to resurface and stripe all the other roads within the village, right now, what we put into the road fund based on the small amount from GRT and the small amounts that we get from motor vehicle tax and combined fuel tax, it's not enough to cover those matches that we need. So we went through the numbers, and we would need about $567,000 every year starting in fiscal year 24 to cover both the match that we need for the 27 million project and then all the other matches that we ask for every year. So because of that, we are proposing a reallocation of GRT to put a total of 15% into the road fund. So that's an increase of 10%, and reducing the GRT that goes into the general fund by that 10%. So that's where you're seeing those large numbers that look like they're dropping. However, it's not because GRT is dropping. It's just that we would like to reallocate 10% of that into the road fund so that we are able to make those matches and complete all of those projects.
So Tammy, let me interject. When I spoke to you the other day, I had asked you what our 9-month GRT was, and you said it was about $3 million,
That is correct.
which if you fast forward that to the end of the year, for a full year, we could be at the $4 million GRT, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, one other side note for this is when we went over this with Trustee Benavides, he was in favor for doing this reallocation. He also said that another thing that we went over regarding GRT is that our GRT is dropping once again July 1. So the state decreased their portion last year by 0.125, and they're doing that again this year. So our total GRT is dropping again. Trustee Benavides did say that he would like to see us potentially increase our GRT back to where it was at 7.4375 before the state dropped their portion. So he wanted us to both consider that at some point and then also say that he was in favor of the reallocation of
Tammy, can we
GRT.
take a 1-minute recess to let George have a seat? Okay, thank you for joining us, George. Okay, go ahead, Tammy.
Are there any questions regarding this reallocation or any comments?
What are, what are our options if we get halfway through the year and GRTs are much lower? I mean, I feel like our first responsibility is to making sure that general fund is funded enough.
Yes.
And so what would our options be if it's like this percentage split isn't working like we thought it would?
Absolutely, Mayor Trustee Lewis. So the options are, so to do that reallocation, it would be through a resolution. So then at any point, we could do a resolution in the next year, the next several years, to rearrange that reallocation. Or the second option is to, instead of reallocating it, is to do a transfer at the end of the year. So right now, just say we are going to transfer X amount of dollars into the road fund at the end of the year. Now, the only potential issue with that is if our funds don't come in as high and we don't have the money to transfer, at some point we'll have to figure out how we get that 1.1 million by fiscal year 26 for that match for the first portion.
Right.
So Tammy, on the very last page that has your total budget, it shows the general fund as of February the 28th, 2023 is $7,650,256. And then it has an excess of 239. So it has an ending cash balance of 7,889,403. But that's as of February 28th, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so I'm now looking at the unapproved cash report for March 31. And the unapproved cash report shows an ending cash balance of $8,453,000. So it looks like it's gone up, unless I'm misreading something. The 7,889 is now 8,400, or will be 8,453 if this cash report is approved. That's $500,000.
Mayor, that is correct. So because it takes me so long to do this comparison, I can't
I understand.
be ready for this meeting with
understand.
those numbers. But as of the end of March, that is the new cash number. So that number will change with the final budget.
Exactly, and so as we move backwards to the beginning of the fiscal year, and I'm trying to figure out this number, this beginning cash balance for general fund of $6,950,000, does that number appear anywhere in the budget? Does it appear anywhere? The beginning,
I'm sorry, which number are you talking about, Mayor?
the $6,950,000, 6,950,990, the beginning cash balance.
Where are you at?
Well,
I don't think that's part of our
I'm
packet. Yeah.
asking if it's in here anywhere.
Yes, so Mayor, if you turn to page 7 of 7,
Okay, 7 of 7. Okay,
which is the second to last page, it is at the bottom of
There it
the
is.
first column.
Okay,
Because
so-
that is actual, those are actual numbers for fiscal year 22. So that is the cash number there.
okay, so to put all of this in perspective, if you look at this reallocation that you're talking about, And I'm trying to find it where it is.
Can I ask a quick question while
Go
you're
right
looking,
ahead.
Mayor? When is GRT percentages going to drop?
July 1st.
July 1st. And did we do kind of a comparison based on, with that drop and the last year, what that might look like?
We have not, but I can do that comparison.
Okay, I think that would be good for us to see, just so that we have an idea. I mean, if everything stayed the same, but GRT percentage dropped, what would that look like?
So Mayor and Trustee Pacheco, we did do that comparison, and that's how we came up with the projected GRT number for this next year. So if you
Okay.
look at on page 1 of the second and third revenue line items, that does take into account the drop, the 1.25% drop.
If you didn't do anything.
Right, if we did nothing.
I see, okay.
So let me
Thank you.
get back to my point about putting it in perspective. We began last fiscal year with a general fund of $6,950. Based upon this last page, using February 28th, 23 numbers, that ending cash balance would be 7,889. That's approximately $1 million increase, just in 8 months, correct?
That is correct.
That's all I want to know, okay. All right. Go ahead, Tammy.
No, I have a question.
Sure.
Is there a reason that it's better to make this reallocation and track it on a monthly versus just doing it at the end of the year? Once we see how grants come in, or, whatever money we get plus how our gross receipts are, is there a reason that it would be some reason better to do it as we go versus just at the end of the year saying, hey, we've got this obligation to move up to 15%?
Yes, so Mayor, Trustee Lewis, so we cannot use any other grants that come in as our match. It has to be our own funds, so so it does have to be our own. Now, the biggest reason to do it at the beginning of the year is just because you don't have any issue with if any other income, if our GRT does not come in as high as we thought, we aren't spending it on any other operation, and we have it set aside for the road fund. Right now, with that reallocation and putting in that money into the road fund, we have not really taken out any other projects, so we still have all of our operations, and we are able to fund everything that we want to and still be in an excess. So that was the one plus of doing it, is we have the money and we don't have anything that we had to necessarily cut out because of that. But the option is still there to do a transfer instead.
So you're obligating those funds on the front end in the way that we're looking at it today?
Yes, Mayor, Trustee Pacheco, we are. And one of the other reasons is it's not for, in a different type of fund, a transfer might make more sense. In this fund, the reason why either one can make sense, and the reason why I chose the reallocation, is because there are always also roads that need to be done in the village. For many years, they were neglected or they weren't done so that we could save for 4th Street, and now we're kind of playing catch up. And so we are asking for a lot of money through the co-op every year to try and get to every single road, and the co-op requires a match. When we ask for TPF funds, that requires a match. And so this past year, in fiscal year 23, we've seen a lot more matches that we've needed than we have in other current years, because we are now focusing on trying to get to these other little roads. So as the years continue, we will need to continue doing other roads, and we are not in the position at the moment to just fund it from the 5% and then the small portion of motor vehicle and combined fuel tax. So that was kind of the thought process on that. We can also talk about, if you think 10% is too high, potentially doing a smaller percentage of reallocation.
Do we have any idea, now that the legislature is over, if there's going to be any drastic changes in terms of funding for maybe that we do go out to DOT for funding, those kind of things? Do we know at this point?
Yes, Mayor and Trustee Pacheco, we do. And it's been communicated to us that we are going to be awarded funding in the future, in future years. The DOT will take care of us, but we have to apply and provide a match. So my concern about doing this allocation front or back is that governments need to fully budget all of their anticipated GRT. So it's hard to set aside $500,000 and not budget that. So any other governing body could come in and take that money and put it somewhere else. Then we have an opportunity to go for a TPF grant, which is the Transportation Program Fund, where we get our big grant funding from DOT, and we have no 25% match. So that's a concern. Versus this funding gets set aside, it's always there for road projects. We've got it. If we need to move it back, we can always move it back, but it's there protected for roads.
And when we say we're trying to catch up on our roads that we've kind of neglected, do we have a really solid listing of those roads? I mean, I know that we talk about it throughout the year and we're going to, try and get to these roads at this point, but do we have a full list of all roads that we're looking at?
Yes, Mayor, Trustee Pacheco, we have, we call it our roads CIP, and we do. We have the entire village mapped out.
And then do we do a kind of a contingent percentage, I guess, maybe for, things that we're not even thinking about that might happen, whether we get a bad storm and, a road falls apart or there's a sinkhole or something to that effect. Are we putting anything aside, and can we?
So Mayor, Trustee Pacheco, we do have some contingents in the maintenance road fund. So it's not in our capital fund, but in maintenance. And if something more, I guess, disastrous were to occur, that was something a lot bigger. We always budget a little extra in the road fund, but we can also do a bar at that point. That's also why we tend to, when we do our budget, have an excess so that we haven't spent all of our money down, and if something comes through, we can do a bar at that point. But we do anticipate small things in our maintenance road fund, in our maintenance road line item, I'm sorry.
Do we have a on-call with contractors for that specific kind of purpose? How would we go about getting that fixed?
Mayor, you might be able to help me on this, but Mayor, Trustee Radnovich, it depends on the size of the project, but our facilities manager usually goes out for quotes. We assess the project, we go out for quotes, and then we try to take care of it as quickly as possible. We don't have...
We have another option too. We can go to CES.
Yes,
There are
thank
on-call
you.
contractors available to municipalities through CES, and I'm not sure if we've ever actually used them on a project. Right off the top of my head, I can't say
Not
that we
sure, I'd
have.
have to...
But we've talked about it a number of times.
You can buy paper from them. You can do anything.
Yes, that's correct. Go ahead.
Mayor, Trustees, yes, CES is available to us. We are a part of that. However, we haven't used them probably in the last couple of years,
We have not.
but we do have that availability to reach out to them.
So I think the answer to the question is, if there's a problem that occurs because of a storm or some other situation that might occur, a sinkhole, for example, like the one over at North Valley Academy, we could get a contractor very quickly and put him to work. That's the best answer I can give you. Okay.
I guess I need to sort of see the rest of the budget, but, obviously my concern is that we're just not cutting any services or caught unprepared for anything that, there's always going to be something we didn't account for come up. But, I'm fine with this if we feel like we're, again, go through the budget and we feel like, and I know you guys do a great job, I feel like everything will be in there.
And
but this is
Mayor,
the first time to look
Trustees,
at it.
yes, so that is, I wanted to let you know kind of about that. But yes, keep that in mind as we go through the budget, and we can definitely revisit it once we've gone through everything and you see everything else that's planned in the budget. We can definitely come back to that, but I wanted you to be aware of that because Those are some big numbers to see dropped there, and just so you know kind of what's going on with what's presented in front of you.
So then my next question is, you've accounted for the 0.1% drop. Where's your projection outside of that? Were you guys increasing our gross receipts over previous years? Were you holding it the same? If we didn't have that in there, what would it look like?
So Mayor Trustee Lewis, after going through all of that and how we projected it, it would be flatlined to this year. So about 3.9 million is what the total would be for next year.
And I have another question based on that. Couldn't we, and I'm not suggesting it, but couldn't we increase our portion of taxes to make up for that?
We can.
Yes, Mayor, Trustee Radnovich. So that is one thing that Trustee Benavides mentioned in his meeting, and also that we have the ability to do. We can do it twice a year. We can bring it before you. So the next time that we would be able to do that would be around September. And we would bring it before you to see if we want to increase it. We would discuss the amount, and then if that did pass and we put it through, it would start January 1 with the new increase. And so we can do that in September, and then again, we can look at it in March. Those are the two times.
Those are the two times. So
Yes.
this is the time. If we wanted to say no,
So
too late.
unfortunately, it's too late now because the one in March goes into effect July 1. But we can definitely, now that we've had this discussion, we can start looking at that for the upcoming around August, September. And then if we vote that in, then it would be effective January 1, 2024.
so if we would have, and I'm not saying you guys didn't catch this or anything, but if we would have wanted it to be a smooth transition and sort of appear to the public that there was no tax increase, it just stayed the same, we would have had to do that in March of this year,
It actually would have had to have been done last year.
last year.
Yes.
So September of last year.
I think the problem is, no one knew about this until
Until
the
the
legislature
judiciary,
ended,
yeah, yeah.
which was the
Or I mean
19th
the,
of March. So,
legislature.
I mean, that's when everybody
Right,
found out.
right, right. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so,
I'm good to keep going then.
Okay.
I think if we come back around after we've seen the budget,
absolutely. Okay, so on page 1 is all of the general fund revenue. We went over the GRT, that's one of the largest drops because of the reallocation. Everything else we have looked at based on a 3-year average or looking at what's going on during the year this year to come up with our numbers. What you'll need to know if you're looking at column E and you're looking at the differences in whether it's dropped or increased, you'll please be aware that column B is an annualized number. So column B is for the fiscal year we're in right now. It is through February for actual revenue received, and then it's annualized through the end of the year. So that number will change, and that affects column E. So just column E and F. So just so you're aware. Column D is the column that is for the interim budget that we're presenting this year. And so we have a total, the other line item that has a significant decrease is the Small Cities Assistance Grant. And this is from the state. They do a calculation. We don't know how much we're gonna get every year. So I do a 3-year average based on the last 3 years of what we received to come up with our number this year. We had 2 years where it was high, 1 year where it was low. And so those are the 3 areas that have the largest, most significant decreases. But overall, you can see that we are just decreasing by $372,000 in the general fund and and about $310,000 of that is not an actual decrease, it's just a transfer into the road fund instead of the general fund. And so if you have any questions on any specific line item, let's go over those questions now.
Just to, I think I understood what you were saying. All of this could change.
Yes, so column D will not change unless we discuss specific numbers that we want to change. That's what we're proposing as the interim budget. But column B and column E will change as we get the remaining numbers for the end of the fiscal year, so the last quarter.
Thank you.
And if I could just reiterate, Of that 372,000 that you see in the red on column E, at the bottom of column E, 310,000 of that is just being transferred to the road fund. So it's not an actual decrease of 372. So it's like we are just putting it aside in another fund.
I have a kind of just a curiosity kind of question, you know me. There's a few funds here, or a few line items here, I should say, that are really low. Like there's nothing there. It's almost not worth capturing. Can they just be put in some, like animal licenses? I mean, it's not like that's a huge money maker for the village or anything. And the same with, there's a bunch of them. Judicial education fee and corrections fee, and do they by statute have to be separated, or by some convention of accounting have to be separated like that?
So Mayor Trustee Radnovich, they are separated like that for the ease of internal, whenever we need to run reports and see where we're making money, where we've made more money in the past or in the future, in the present year. So we do that for kind of the internal purposes.
I see.
Also for the state, there are certain line items that do need to be broken out specific ways. And some of our fees, when I present them to the state, they kind of get rolled up into one line item. But a lot of that is for our internal purposes, to be able to track and easily run reports without me having to go and dig through things.
I see. That makes sense. Just curious. We do a lot with sale of recycled materials. Wow.
How did you arrive at your investment income?
Okay, yes, so investment income is changing a lot for a good reason. Over the past several years, our investment in the LGIP fund dropped to a yield of practically nothing. And so you can see that in column A from fiscal year 22, our investment income was $6,000. And we were yielding, I think, 0.05% on a $3 million balance. And so this year, we have seen a huge turn, and the LGIP yield has been anywhere between 3 and 4 or plus 4%. And so the past several months, our yield from LGIP has been anywhere between $9,000 and $12,000. Because of this increase, we moved an extra $2 million into LGIP so that we could gain even more investment income. And so based on that yield and based on the trend seeing it go up, and the fact that we moved an extra $2 million in, we've increased it based on that. And and this past month, March, I believe was almost $17,000 that after we moved the $2 million in.
Great. Wow. My final question would be just on what makes up your land rent number?
Okay, yes.
I'm sorry, which number?
Land rent?
Oh.
Mayor Trustee Lewis, so this is a few items that is going to be from tenants that we have. So we own Miller's Feed. They give us a monthly rent income, and then this is also from renting out any of our village properties, so the barn or the ag center, anywhere that we receive money for renting out one of our facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further comments on that, we can move on to some of the expenses. Okay. So on page 2, we start with the general fund expenses, and we have 2 departments here. We'll start with the executive legislative department at the top of the page, and that's the first half of the page. So this includes the trustees, the mayor, and Administrator Simon for payroll. And this payroll that you'll see throughout every single department, there's 2 items to just note. It includes a 2% COLA for the staff at July 1. And it also includes up to a 3% merit-based raise at their annual evaluation. And so you'll see that in every single payroll department as we go through each one. You'll see an increase there for those reasons. Yes, and so for that, if you look at the first line item for wages elected officials, there is a 74% increase here, and there are two reasons for that in this line item alone. So the first is proposing a raise for the elected officials from $50 a meeting to $200 per month for a BOT meeting, and a potential $50 extra for a special meeting or for a finance meeting like today, another meeting. So that would be an increase for that, and also an increase in the pay for the mayor to $15 an hour. This is based on half of the year because it wouldn't start until January 1st. So it's about $16,500.
Did you say that there's a 3% merit raise
Up to,
Up to it,
beyond a cost of living?
right.
yes.
Okay, and what do we calculate as cost of living?
So
2%, that's a
we
little
did
low.
2%. Now, in the meeting,
Cost of living.
Right.
in the meeting with Trustee Benavides, he did say he believed that was a little bit low. And he wanted, he kind of, mentioned wanting us to look at other municipalities, like somewhere like Corrales, just to see what they did, because he did say he believed that inflation was higher than that 2%. And so I did do some research on that, if you guys want me to go into that and tell you what I found, but that's, the 2% is what we've.
I would like to hear that, but also, the cost of living is usually between 2% and 3% per year, isn't it? It's higher than 2% typically.
Yes, Mayor Trustee Radnovich. So the cost of living, it's called the cost of living adjustment because it's across the board here for everyone. We, at our discretion, are able to do whatever percentage that we feel that we can and need to. So yes, you are correct in researching cost of living is between 2% and 3%.
And when we give raises, we give them across the board, the merit raise goes to everyone, or do we?
No, Mayor Trustee Radnovich. So the cost of living increase that we're proposing, July 1, that would go to everyone right away. The merit-based is based on performance at the annual evaluation. So every employee gets an evaluation at their annual hire date, and that is done by the supervisors and the administrator, or the mayor if they're under the mayor. And at that point, based on performance, based on everything, excuse me, they can receive anywhere 0, 1, 2, 3%. And that's where we budget for the most, but it could be anywhere in between based on performance.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Appreciate it, Tammy.
And so I'm sorry.
I did have one other comment. My friend Stephen Naya up in Moriarty, I was talking to him about wages, and Moriarty has been paying their counselors, I believe he told me $250 per meeting since 1997. So are we behind?
We are. We've been behind
We're
for a long
substantially
time.
behind.
We're substantially behind. Honest to God, we're substantially.
So, Mayor and Trustee Radnovich, that is taken into consideration here on the top line item of the wages of elected. We are moving to $200 a meeting for newly elected and re-elected trustees, and $50 for extra special meetings like this meeting, if we have another public meeting somewhere else.
And how did you set $200? I mean, hearing Steve tell me that they've been paying $250 since 1997, I thought, whoa, we're really behind. Why 200? Why not 300 or 250 anyway? And you probably have these figures from Corrales, I'm guessing.
Well, we are looking, Mayor and trustees, at sort of what's palatable to the public, what's palatable during an election year, what's palatable. It's going from 50 to 250 is a big jump. Going from 50 to 200 seemed fair, especially given that we added up the number of minutes that we did in 2022, and instead of 12 sets of minutes, it was 24 sets of minutes.
And this is just because past administrations just never really looked at it.
Mayor Trustee Radnovich, or did not approve it. Either or.
Yeah.
Mayor Trustee Radovich, we did bring this to the governing body, I want to say in late 2020.
Yeah.
And we did provide an average of what other towns and municipalities are earning. However, the board at that time chose not to approve it.
Oh, I see. And then we talked about it this year too,
And-
Danielle, or last year, I'm sorry.
Last year.
In the beginning of 2022, we talked about it, and it was not palatable at that point to the governing body.
Well, I think what we said, and I'm not trying to argue at all, but I think what we said is bring it back to us because.
Right, you did
yeah,
say that.
We didn't say it's not palatable.
We wanted it brought back, and it's being brought back now.
I see, got it.
And I think we also had mentioned that maybe it was something that the Citizens Advisory Committee could take a look at as well to help us bridge the concern by residents of the village. I mean, I think we all just wanted it to be something we can all settle on.
Right.
Yeah, I think, first of all, in your question about us being behind, I didn't feel like we were behind because it's always been considered, being a trustee's always been considered being a voluntary position.
Yeah.
And so it was, years ago when I started, we got a per diem.
Oh,
You got a little bit for your transportation to and from meetings,
I
et
see.
cetera. And
and
then
that went away in place of,
and then we switched it to a flat fee.
I see.
Now, I think obviously, to me anyway, the position of mayor has changed dramatically. I think the position of trustees going forward has changed dramatically and is requiring considerably more time.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's something we need to revisit. It's very hard to sit up here as a trustee and even though it's not for you and, it's for the next generation or the next after the election.
Right.
It's hard to sit up here and go, figure out what that number is. And I think, at the time, we felt like we're not ready to do that.
Right.
We were in disagreement. I know I've changed a lot. I was pretty much anti doing much with it, and now I think I've changed a lot.
Right.
But it's still a hard thing to come up with that number and agree on a number.
Yeah, what is it?
And that's what I was hoping at one time that the Citizens Advisory Committee, I think it just looks better, it feels better to everybody if we don't set the number. If, you get a good group of people that come back and say, here's what I think.
But if you have,
Municipalities.
Yeah.
doing the same thing, well, that's, we can use those as a realtor uses,
Comps, right?
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's something that needs to be revisited, and I think it's something that needs to be changed before this election.
Yeah. I
And so it
agree.
will be for half the year. I always am concerned in the last 5 years or so, our salaries and our payroll has gone up tremendously. I know in the past couple of years, it's like, well, it's been a tough year. It was COLA, it was COVID, it was this, so we're gonna give a bigger raise. I have some concern over that, in that, all of a sudden, here we go. I would think most everybody's gonna get a 5% raise, because I feel like everybody's doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at some point, we've really got to keep a cap on this payroll.
Right.
That's the thing that can spin out of control the most for us. We've added some people, we've given raises. So, that's just a cautionary thing for me. I do feel like, especially the position of the mayor, needs to be addressed and decided, and really trustees too, I think.
I agree, trustee.
Yeah.
And I tend to look at, the private world, and in the private world, we do, as you know, cost of living every year, but only merits when there's merit.
Right.
And so, I agree.
Well, the other thing to consider in the private world, and you know this, George, better than anybody, a registered professional engineer with 10 or more years of valuable experience basically makes $75 an hour. That's the going rate in Albuquerque, New Mexico. In Denver, it's 125. In other towns like Los Angeles, Chicago, Washington, D.C., it's $200 an hour. So New Mexico is still low, quite frankly, it's still low. Even at that rate, it's still low.
It's low with every profession.
With every profession, so you're competing with the outside sector to find good people.
Right.
And unless you pay them a wage that's comparable, quite frankly, to the private sector.
You lose.
You're gonna have a hard time.
Yeah.
It's gonna be rough.
True.
Now, I do want to say, we shouldn't lose sight. I think we have a tremendous benefit package, you know. I mean, so, you know, we can seem a little low in some areas, but the total package, I think, that we offer, I think we've gotten ourselves much more competitive out there in the last year.
The
And
one
again,
area-
on top of that, we have a really good
The
benefit.
one area that we are not competitive is in that planner position. We can't find a planner position at any salary, and I'm worried about that. I'm very worried about that,
Mayor,
where they are.
is that across the state? I seem to have heard that that's
must
an
be.
issue across the
It
state.
must be, it must be.
It's an issue with so many professions. I mean, I can't find landscape architects. We find planners, but not landscape architects. So it's hard all across the country now.
Mayor and trustees, this is probably our fourth advertisement for a planner. We've gone out to the national level, we've gone to UNM, APA, the association in the state of New Mexico, to provide them with our job description. Along ours, there's 10, 15 others. It's not only municipalities, it's tribal associations, et cetera. So there's many entities looking for planners, so it's a tough competition out there.
I will also say, as far as, and this sort of relates, I guess, to everything we're talking about, but not so much to budget, but a lot of planners today, and Ann may know this, but and so might Maida, a lot of planners today are looking for more environmental issues than policy planning. So everybody in that school, at UNM anyway, is looking for environmental planning and sustainability planning and fire planning. They're all interested in the sort of part of planning, but they're not interested in policy planning as much, which is the kind of planner we need. So that's, I think, why we're having a hard time finding a planner, and that may be different in other schools. I don't know if we've approached anyone but UNM, but it might be different at University of Colorado, Denver or something.
Yeah, Mayor, trustees, this is a really tough nut to crack. We are doing exactly what Trustee Radnovich said. We are approaching other schools. We're looking in Colorado, and I think to some extent he's correct. It's really fun to do the design and imagination stuff. It's fun to tackle the big global environmental issues, climate change, and so forth. And most municipalities across the nation are looking for planners. So, but our pay band is very competitive. And it's not just the hourly rate, it is the benefits package that is included. So I stand by the work that Maida and Danielle have been doing. It's excellent. I mean, we're right in there with all of the top jobs.
One last comment. Are there ways we could put a planner to work that would be partially environmentally oriented? Say they help with planning the Agri-Nature Center, or with reforestation of the village, or we've been talking about in the Citizens Advisory Committee for the Village Center, looking at open space and trying to determine where the best parts of the parcels are for conservation easements, that kind of thing. I mean, could we start to have that kind of language in our
Job
advert?
description?
Yeah.
Mayor, trustees, absolutely. So, should we move on?
And I know this is a little off topic. I just
Yeah.
One more quick question. Could you explain to me again what you did? I know we're doing 200 figured in there for trustees. What again was your formula for the mayor?
It's, let me give you the
It's
exact.
$15 an hour, basically, is what it comes down to.
the minimum wage.
16,500,
Yes,
I
it's-
think is what.
Yes, it's moved, it's just minimum wage, which is exactly what the mayor's pay was based on when this was done 15 years ago.
Oh, I
So we
see.
just followed suit
s-
with that.
So what is that per year?
For the full fiscal year, so we're only budgeting half this year because it wouldn't take effect till January, but for a full fiscal year, it's about 33,100.
And how many hours a week do you spend, Mayor?
Well, let me say it this way. I may not be full-time, but it's a full-time job because you're on duty 7 days a week. That's a bottom line. So my pay is based on 2,080 hours a year, $5.77 an hour today.
I see.
And when it was passed in December of 2003, the minimum wage was $5.50. So they put it at $5.77 because it was a little bit over the minimum wage. Today is $15 an hour.
Right.
So that's what it is, yeah.
So that translates into, a full year would be in the 33,000.
Right.
Yes.
The one thing, and I've talked to Councilor Benavides about this offline from meetings repeatedly, but I do agree with him on, and this is probably a controversial sort of comment, but I do agree with him that it sort of excludes from the mayor's position or even trustee positions, people that can't afford it, people that, so it sort of it makes the positions more easily handled by either retirees or those towards the end of their careers or people that have enough money that they don't have to worry about money.
That's correct.
And so
you
it does
bring
exclude a certain part of the
You
population.
bring a great point. The bottom line is, if you look at every mayor going all the way back to Alfredo Garcia, which was 1988, and even the mayor before that, the gentleman whose picture's right up there on the wall, they were all essentially retired. And that's just the way it is.
And George, I was very much in that camp last time we visited this a year ago or something. And I've really changed my thinking. I think it's time to, I felt like, hey, these are volunteer positions, but I don't think that's the case anymore. And I think to get up to, this $30,000 range.
And we might want to be more aggressive. I mean, I'm not opposed to any of the figures that we've been batting around here, but I think we might want to be more aggressive in 6 years or whenever that is, the next time it comes
2028.
around.
That's correct.
Now, and again, it'd be nice if the Citizens Advisory Committee could give us some guidance, but if they don't, I think we need to visit it and make a decision sooner rather than later for this election and for the upcoming year.
The CAC is meeting weekly now, so,
Bi-weekly.
oh, that's right, biweekly. We went to biweekly. We're meeting this week. We could at least discuss it as a agenda item. I mean,
Mayor and trustees, not to cut off this fabulously rich discussion, but one of the things that I think might help to shed some light on the issue is when we get through the entire budget and you see how well we've budgeted, we did a great job and you'll see some wiggle room at the end of it. If we want to go back then and have a deeper discussion about this particular department, we can do that. Also, it will have to come before you by resolution, so you'll have an opportunity in another public meeting to discuss it.
and this will be before when?
May.
May.
That's
The
the first
interim
draft,
budget
and
will
July
be
is the final.
presented to you in May after this discussion. Any changes, I will put them into this and we'll present it to you in May. And then the final budget is presented in July, once I have all the year-end numbers and we know exactly what we ended our cash with, all of our actual,
Yes.
that'll be presented in July.
Thanks, Tammy. One last comment or a question. What does Corrales, you mentioned Corrales at the very beginning of this discussion.
Oh, yes, Mayor, Trustee Benavides. So, Trustee Radovich, Trustee Benavides asked me to look at a similar municipality. So I went out and I did some research for COLAs across the nation. The average is 8.7%.
Whoa.
I was shocked as well, but Corrales actually January 2022 gave a COLA of 9.84%.
Wow.
Yes, so it was significantly higher. I was actually very shocked to see that, but He asked me to do that because he said he thought that the 2% was low. And so I did do that, and I pulled up that information and found that. They also,
May have been playing catch-up.
they may have, and then because they also gave an additional 7% increase to hourly employees that were below the mid of the new pay range they proposed. So they did some big increases there.
Interesting.
And just one last final point on this. You mentioned catch-up, Trustee Radnovich and trustees. This is exactly what Mayor Lopez, when he came in, was doing with all the employees when he first took office, because there hadn't been pay raises in the village of Los Ranchos since before Mayor Abraham took office.
Interesting.
A great example, and I'll just point this out. We had Gil Saavedra as our CFO,
Nope, sorry, Mayor, he was just an accountant.
an accountant.
Yes.
He made less than she earned when she got the job. So to hire somebody to replace that person who had been here 14 years and was doing a great job.
Yeah, that's
You
crazy.
had to pay more.
Yeah, that's,
I mean, that's
it's
just the way it
crazy
is.
that Mayor Abraham didn't have regular look, or at least a look at salary increases. That's pretty amazing.
So Mayor, trustees, so in interest of getting through the budget, if we could continue on, but keep that in mind if we want to revisit the COLA after you see that, well, you know, where we're at in the budget, we can do that at the end.
Did you by any chance ask what their mayor and what their, I don't think they have trustees, they have village councilors, right? In Corrales?
I believe so. I did not
Oh,
get a
okay.
chance to do that.
I was just curious. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so going on beyond that, so to the portion of the non-payroll expenses in the executive legislative, everything has pretty much stayed the same budget-wise from this year to next year. Right now, you'll see kind of weird numbers because one of the large trips, the big trip to DC had not happened yet when I did this budget. So everything there stays the same. And in the judicial, there's really no change, just the increase for the payroll, the COLA, and the merit-based. That's the only change you'll see in the judicial. Other than that, everything else is the same.
Excuse me, Tammy, Mayor, trustees, can we take a couple of minutes break right now? Comcast was having problems with the feed, and Live Control needs to get things back up, so that way we don't lose any data. If everyone wants to get some coffee, there's some goodies, bathroom break, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor, trustees, so to continue on, we are on page 3 of 7 of the general fund comparison. And here you'll see 2 departments again. The top portion is financial administration. That includes the treasurer and myself for the payroll portion. And again, that includes the COLA we talked about and the merit-based increases. And then below the payroll are just a few items we take out of financial administration. There's really no major changes here. Our audit fees should stay the same. Computer services will go up. I should say they were going to go up. They actually are going to end up being pretty close to this year. We wanted to implement a new module, and I had issues with getting our software people online and getting them to give us a training, and after months of trying to contact them, I just asked them for a refund because they were not responsive, so we're not going to implement the new module. No, it's Abilla. Abilla is the software that we use. Yeah, I never have any trouble with Kiko. And then the other place that you'll see a decrease in there is for the contract services for temp labor. This was budgeted this past year for my maternity leave and hiring a temp, and we will not have any of that charge this year. So everything else stays the same. Do you have any questions on the financial?
Sure.
We won't have that again at all.
You were looking at me waiting, so. So explain who's in part-time.
That's for the
And how does-
treasurer.
Huh?
The treasurer,
Full-time is,
myself.
okay, and then the treasurer's in part-time.
Yes,
Okay, so that's reflecting the increase we gave the treasurer.
yes.
Okay, okay.
Now, moving on to the second part of the page is for the Planning and Zoning Department. This includes the planning director, the planning assistant, code enforcement, and potential for an intern and a planner. So all of those are budgeted here. You will still see just a small increase for full-time, and then as you can see, there's some decreases in column E for the rest of payroll. The reason for that is because animal control used to be budgeted here because at one point they were part-time animal control, part-time code enforcement. That has been removed. That position has been moved into the ag department, and so that's kind of why you see those numbers acting a little funny there, is we moved that out. Below, a lot of the non-payroll expenses stay the same. A lot of those are charges we know are coming. We have charge for Bernalillo County to do our building permits. We have charges for hazardous mitigation plan, stormwater team preparation, EPA stormwater monitoring. All of those are charges we know the exact amount of every year, so a lot of that does not change. The one item that is changing a little bit is subscriptions and memberships. Part of that is, again, that column B is an annualized number, and we've paid all of our memberships, I believe, except for one that comes now at the end of the year. So that number in column B is kind of not a good representation of how we'll end the year. It should be closer to about 16,000.
Tammy, can I just quickly ask on the fees? You said that we know what those are every year. Do they change year to year? And then that's what we kind of budget in?
Yes, Mayor Trustee Pacheco. Some of those do change, like the EPA stormwater monitoring based on what year we're in. It kind of, it's $200 a year. Certain years, some it's $400, and then every, I think, fifth year, it's $2,000. So we have a little schedule that we've been provided, and we know what the fee will be depending on what year we're in.
Thank you.
And I believe, like I said, there's not really many changes here. Are there any questions over the Planning and Zoning Department that haven't been?
I do just have one other question, sorry, trustee. The village vision, it seems to be working the way that we had hoped that it would with the changes that were made. We don't anticipate any other changes with regard to the way we're doing the village vision at this point?
Mayor, trustees, no, but that's not reflected in this particular
Oh, okay,
department.
it's not
That's
in
in the
here.
next one.
Okay, sorry about
But
that.
that's correct. Nope.
And I think the reason why you were thinking it here is at one point Jennifer was doing that and she was housed in this department.
Right.
But we pulled that responsibility from the assistant when we hired a new one, so it's no longer in here.
Okay, thank you.
So inherently, I'm troubled, and I guess it's to point out, I mean, when I look at the financial administration, you know, 112,000 at the end of 2022, we're annualizing that this will be 130, which is 18,000 more, and then we're budgeting 28,000 more on that. I mean, George, to your question, we have caught up, in my opinion. We've added some people, you know, because everybody was overworked, and you know, we've spread that out. This is a number that just, you know, next year's budget will be, oh, well, it's 158,000 and we're only going up 2% or something, or 3 or 5%. Man, these numbers are getting big for this, and that's becoming a big obligation when you take our overall village budget. And the same thing down at planning and zoning. You know, you go from 219 to 282 to 309. I mean, these are significant increases, very significant increases.
Well, Trustee Lewis, let me offer you a perspective on this. When I became the mayor on April 30th of 2018, our cash balance was $7 million. The 4th Street project began construction in February of 2018, 2 months before that. And it was finished at the end of 2019 at a cost of almost $9 million. Today, our cash balance is $12 million. That's about a 70% increase. But the reason I bring that up, the workload that these people are having to deal with on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis has increased sharply. I remember when I was Mayor Pro Tem, before the late mayor passed away, we didn't have anything like this workload. It wasn't even close. And so I think that's part of the reason why you see some of these increases, because you have a significantly greater workload and you also have a much higher budget. That's just a perspective from my side.
I can understand that, Mayor. I would also say that we have departments that no other villages our size
That's true.
have, like Agri-Nature Center. I mean,
You're right.
what other town or village in
None.
the
No one has
state
that.
has anything like that?
Nothing like that.
And then the other thing about that as well is we're probably unlike most other villages or municipalities in the state, because we're really small compared to, say, Albuquerque, but we share some of the same issues that Albuquerque does because of 4th Street. And so it's a more complicated kind of place, I think, than maybe Corrales, for instance.
You're right on, George. You're right on.
Mayor, trustees, may I also add, we do wear a lot of hats. Some places you'll see some lower salaries. However, there's a few other people within each department. But one thing, I know that you've seen the numbers climb. One thing I do want to also just let you know is our payroll to general fund expenditure percentage, payroll's 42% of that total budget. And in a lot of municipalities, it can get upwards to close to 70%. So just kind of to ease your concern as you've seen those numbers grow, we are holding really well, keeping that lower than many municipalities are able to.
If things got bad for us as a village, there are things we could shed.
Exactly.
I mean, I hate to say it that way, but there are things we could shed.
Exactly.
And I guess I come from a camp of, as long as everybody's aware of that,
Yeah.
at some point, it's like, what is your fallout plan if things just go bad? I don't know where the economy's going or anything else, but, once you give raises and once you hire people, it's awfully hard to stop cutting back and pushing that workload back over to other people and keeping them. And it's a very different environment employee-wise. But I think it's just something that I want to make sure everybody's very aware of, that if it's not working, I won't hesitate to come in and say, we got to take action, and I know the mayor will too.
I hang out in your camp too sometimes.
These numbers have jumped up significantly.
Yeah.
And I know workload, I know we've added people to get it spread out, and it's working. I just want to make sure, I'm glad to hear it's still at a 42% of general fund, because there's a lot of services that we're being asked to provide and that we do provide, and we need to make sure, number one, that all those services keep being provided, so.
Yes, and Mayor, trustees, the other thing that we are very unique in is being able to budget with an excess. As an auditor in the past, it was very, very rare that we would see that municipalities were able to budget with an excess at the end of the year. Many were funds in, funds out every year. And so that has helped us to grow our cash balance, and that has helped us to stay in such a good, healthy financial position.
Okay.
Okay, we are going to move on to the next page, which is, if I can find my sheet here, page 4 of 7. This is going to be one department. This is our general administrative department. This is where the bulk of the expenditures for the general fund come out. This, at the top portion, the payroll includes two people, the administrative assistant and the clerk. And you will,
I'm sorry, who was the second one?
the administrative position and the clerk.
Okay.
And you will see that there was part-time in the prior year. And I'm sorry, there was no part-time. We have a part-time position for a project coordinator that we are trying to hopefully potentially fill to help with some of the administrative items. And we have budgeted for that. And so you will also see in column E for the payroll expenditures, everything looks kind of funky and negative because we had last year a position for an executive assistant, a full-time. And again, because of just the market right now, we had a very hard time filling that position or even getting applicants. So we went back, strategized on that, and instead of budgeting that as an employee for the things that we need them to complete, we are looking at a professional service contract to try and contract someone to do items that won't take a full-time amount of time to do. So we've moved that expense down into the professional services line item below. And that's gonna be, let's see, about eight lines down on in the non-payroll expenditures. So moving on to the non-payroll expenditure portion, this is where we house a lot of just everything that goes on. Our workman comp fees, per diem for all of the staff except for executive administrative staff. And we have one of the biggest items we'd like to point out is the attorney fees. Attorney fees have gone up significantly. Right now, the annualized number in column B, I believe, is going to be low based on just everything going on. We should end closer to the 170, 180 mark. And in fiscal year 22, we ended at 170. So just based on everything going on right now, we budgeted for the same thing. We also have an increase here in our professional services line item. And that is because we are putting the person that we wanted to do executive administrative in the past, we moved that out of payroll, like I mentioned earlier, and put it into that line item. That's one of the biggest reasons that the professional services line item jumped up. We also have payment there for the Village Vision design, and that's what you were asking about, Trustee Pacheco, in 1700. So that's where the design comes out of now. And we also have things like transcription services if necessary, and facilitation of a facilitator at certain meetings, and then also the lobbyist. So those are all in that line item, and that's why you see the increase in that line item.
That's all on line item 151?
Correct. And then the next line item that is a significant increase is our supply line item.
Tammy, can
Yes.
I hold you up just a minute?
Absolutely.
I'm writing as fast as I can. So professional services is executive administrator, lobbyist. If and when we get that position filled on the exit. Okay. And then, was there somebody else in there?
Village Vision design.
Is in that line?
And the last two that are smaller is for transcription services and facilitation services, if we find those necessary at different times throughout the year.
Like we had Tim come to the big meeting at the Agri-Nature Center.
Yes, correct.
And that is both line item 151 and 165. Oh, no, just water rights on 165. Got it. And that was because of the water rights that we
Yes.
have been, yep, with Berlin.
Well, in Los Lunas.
Los Lunas, yep. And the temp labor, is that, well, it's going down into contract services, so sorry.
Yeah, contract services, temp labor, that's for Maria Rinaldi and the project management that she provides.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as you can see, we no longer have the AAA storage. That will be removed next year, as we haven't had anything since that's obviously been bulldozed. And then the next line item that has a significant increase are our supplies. So our basic supplies are staying steady. However, we do have several items that we are needing to replace that have not been replaced in potentially 5-10 years. We have consulted with Kiko. He is our IT. He keeps a list of all of our IT inventory and when they're kind of coming due. We have let's see, 7 computers that are getting to the last leg that we don't want them to crash before we end up replacing them. They're over 8 years old. And so we have those replacement of computers in the supply line item budget, also some replacement of Wi-Fi routers, and also replacement of the 2 TVs behind you. You guys don't normally see them because you're looking this way. The TVs behind you, one of them is almost going out and they were purchased at the same time. So the other one is getting ready as well. So we have those in the budget to replace. And those are the items that we have along with our normal supply budget.
One other, all of the iPads that you all have are on their last legs. As you may know, you have to keep them plugged in to keep a charge. So we're going to do very simple
2-in-1 computer.
2-in-1 computer. So you just are able to
Surface.
look at your packet, look at your email, but it's not like a full service computer. It's a very simple tablet. We're going to change over from Apple to a simpler tablet.
Will we still be able to make our notes, comments, and that kind of thing on it?
Yes.
I have a couple questions on that line item. That doesn't include the labor of someone like Kiko installing those computers, getting them all built for the software and et cetera?
Mayor Trustee Radnovich, that is correct. That does not include that for his labor.
And then the other question is, does it include software too?
In supplies, yes, the software is included. The labor for any of those new install items, that's actually up in the professional services computer support in the 45150. That's where the labor cost is for any of those new installs or setups.
And then one last question, and this is more selfish on my part. Are we going to get real outlook for the trustees and the mayor instead of that weird version that we have that is really kludgy?
Trustee Radnovich, I am not sure. We can definitely look into that because
That would
I
be
wasn't aware of that. So yes, we will make sure that that's
You need a better version.
something.
That's what you need.
It's really, yeah. I won't go any further.
Okay, and the last line item, Mayor Trustees, that's really a big difference is down towards the bottom, the utilities. As you can see, we've zeroed that out. Unfortunately, not because we won't have utilities, but because we are moving all utilities into the 1960 department. Right now, they're split between 1840, 1960, and 1970.
Talking code again. 1960.
Yes, I'm sorry. So the 1960 department is the facilities department, and 1970 is ag. So right now we have utilities split in 3 places. There used to be, I guess, a rhyme and reason for that. Now at this point, the only 2 true bills that are for this, or the couple bills for this building, which would be in 1840, are water, utility, gas, and Comcast for this building. Everything else is should be housed in 1960 unless it's for the Ag Center. However, because Keen is the facility manager and he truly manages all facilities, including the Ag Center, for internal purposes and for making it easier on me, we're just budgeting it all into 1960, which is facilities, because there's no other reason why I mean, there might have been in the past more here, but to be able to see what bill is for what area, every bill has a service address on it. So we're able to pull that anyway. And so this just makes it easier internally. So we've moved that into the one of the next departments we'll look at. Do we have any questions on the general administrative budget?
What kind of machinery and equipment do we rent?
It's really just the large printer, the Konica Minolta.
Oh.
That's the biggest thing for the 1840, the general
I
administrative.
see.
Okay, with no comments or questions, I'm going to move on to page 5 of 7. And this has 2 different departments on it. The first one is 1920, which is public safety. So for this department, what this is for Fred Radosevich and his contract to provide us with his services as the liaison. and that is gonna stay pretty much the same. I do anticipate column B being a little higher once we get to the end of the year.
Is that just based on the hours he's putting in, or?
Yes, that is correct, based on the hourly rate and his hours he puts in. The number you see in column D is actually the amount that we've budgeted every year for the past 3 years, 3 or 4 years, and it's just been lower. Part of why it was lower in fiscal year '22 is we were able to have some of his expense out of the Rescue Act.
Just a quick question on his and Maria's contract. How often how long, I guess, are their contracts in place for, and when do those come up? Do we know?
Mayor, trustees, I believe that we review them annually.
We do,
is
and
okay.
Maria's comes up the end of December.
Yes.
Not sure about Fred.
I believe Fred's is December as well? It might have been a little
Maybe. It
earlier.
may
I'll have to go
also
back
be-
and get the
may also
actual
be
date.
December.
But we do review them annually, and there is potential for them to change annually.
Okay, and so there's a possibility that, I mean, I hate to even think it or say it, but that Fred would want to just completely retire.
That's correct.
And then we'd have to look at replacing that position, and what would that look like in terms of a contract rate, right?
That is correct, yes.
And
there
are
is.
we measuring those rates with other municipalities, or, I mean, I don't even know where those would kind of lay at this point, but I think it's something we probably need to consider. I mean, those are truly two valuable contract positions within our village,
Let
you
me
know?
offer a comment on that. In regards to Maria and Fred, the hourly rate that we are paying them is actually lower than what you would have to pay if you had to go out and find somebody to do that same kind of work. But they really provide a valuable service to the village. They both have over 30 years of experience in doing the work that they do. And so we're getting an enormous bargain with those two individuals. I can tell you that right now. It's there. There's no question about it. Let me give you a historical perspective. 10 years ago, when the village first decided to use Bernalillo County Sheriff, we had a $200,000 a year MOU with him. But about 5 or 6 years ago, the $200,000 went away, and we're back to a much lower number. But that's what it was costing 7, 8 years ago. So we're actually getting a significant bargain there too. Now, the fire is a different story. That we'll talk about in a little while. That's been the same for a long time, but it's probably gonna go up.
And I think we all don't even want to think about what it would be if either one of those people would leave.
Oh yeah, it'd be a problem.
Mayor, trustees, there was another issue we wanted to bring up with you, and it's not exactly relevant to the general fund, but we're kind of talking about police and our liaison with BCSO, and I thought it was a good time to bring it up. We've heard from all of you over the last year a desire to increase presence from the BCSO in the village, whether that's a full-time sheriff deputy housed out of the village, whether it's just increased police presence and better relations with the sheriff's department. We feel like we're getting really good service from BCSO. Right now we have this great area command captain, Kimbrough, who's come by numerous times since he's been stationed over here. And he's been great. And I hope that you all have seen some cruisers around a little bit more often. And we are going to propose, there's already an increase in the what's called the LEPF fund. It's a pass-through fund that the state gives us. It was $45,000. It's going up to $95,000. That alone will help the BCSO give us better service. We are proposing sort of sweetening the pot, so to speak, and adding $25,000 additional so that they can pay overtime and give their employees, their deputies, a little bit more incentive to serve the village. Did you want to add anything, Mayor?
Yes, Justin Kimbrough is the new North Area Commander, and he's the best I've ever seen, even though the fellow that was there 7 years ago was outstanding. But Justin has made a commitment to the village to have 2 of his most veteran deputies be involved in village matters.
It's excellent.
And so I think the commitment that we're seeing from BCSO now, it's as good as it's ever been, and it's gonna get better. I asked him a question a week ago. I said, how good are we the rest of this year? And he said, you don't have to worry. He told me flat out, he says, you don't have to worry. He says, we're on top of it. We're gonna monitor the village, whatever it takes, and I believe him. He's excellent.
So with this proposed increase of 25,000 and you said it's a pass-through or not?
No, that's
No,
not-
Mayor
That's our
Trustee
commitment?
Pacheco, that's our commitment. The 95,000 is a pass-through.
Okay.
That comes from the state, it comes into us, and we pass it through to them for use on equipment, apparatus, and training. But the 25,000 would be through an MOU with us for any way that they need it for an officer, salaries, whatever it is that they
Okay,
need.
so it's that set 25,000 that we would give to them, or would it could be 20, or it could be 19, or?
So Mayor
20 today.
Trustees, we're suggesting 25,000 for the 6 months that's in this fiscal year. That would in turn be 50,000 for the
an entire
next
year.
following fiscal year when we budget.
I think that's excellent, and I feel like the residents have asked for that. You know, they want to see more of a presence. I hope that we all agree that is an important spend for the village, I think, to our constituents, just based on what we've heard. And I think that's a small price to pay, honestly, for, you know, for more attention to the village.
So, let me understand. We do this in a MOU. Can we direct how that money's spent, or is it just, we're giving it to them hoping it goes to overtime and things, but it just
So-
gets thrown in their general fund and we're not really sure
Mayor
if
Trustee
that's
Lewis,
accomplished or not. It's nice to say that's what we want it for. In
absolutely.
reality, is it really for that?
Yes, so through an MOU, we can designate, and they would have to provide us with the documentation before we just gave, it wouldn't just be a check for 25,000. They would provide us with the documentation, so we have that on our end to show that they're holding up their part of the MOU, and then we would reimburse them in that way.
Do they, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Couple of questions that may be questions that you can't answer, not sure. I know that the City of Albuquerque Open Space Division disbanded its police, its open space police specifically, and that APD is now monitoring and have police in open space, part of which is the edge of the village on the riverside. Does BCSO contribute anything towards that, or do we actually have APD officers now patrolling the open space that the city controls in the Bosque, along the path and the clear ditch and et cetera? That part of it.
So Mayor Trustee Radnovich, I'm not sure on the APD side. I know that the county would not have theirs in there because it's not their jurisdiction,
Right.
but I'm not sure on the APD side the answer to that question.
We can ask Fred.
Yeah, I was just, because it may be a missed place that there might need to be some security. The other question I have is, can the BCSO get into gated communities? I mean, like, for instance, there's a few around Los Ranchos, right? Do they patrol in?
Well, you can probably speak to that.
Oh.
Being in,
I've seen them in there.
Oh, so they have some kind
I
of
don't know if
access.
they sneak in behind somebody or.
fence.
But, yeah, I've seen them driving through, so
Okay,
I'm assuming they have.
way in somehow.
Mayor,
And I think for
Trustees?
emergencies and
Yeah.
stuff, George, they would have to have
the code, yeah.
access to every,
The
gated
EMS services
that's right now.
absolutely has access.
Yeah.
and now I think you make a good point though, George. I think we as trustees should think about you know, and with, along with you all, as to what we want in that MOU.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to add some bosky
Patrol.
protection, then we should put that in there. And if we need to say, hey, we're willing to go to 30,000, you know, 'cause I feel like one of the things I've heard is security,
Right?
and going back to your statement, that's one of the costs we have of doing business being next to Albuquerque. We're having to pay more for security because our relationship
Borders.
with them.
Well,
And so
yeah.
I think to, you know, I challenge everybody to think about what we want in this MOU. I think it's a great thing. I agree with you. I think we want to just make sure we spell it out on things that we think maybe are missing, you know. I don't know that how they could do anything with, you know, security on exequias, et cetera. But, you know, let's ask for whatever we can ask for.
Well, and that brings
Sounds
up,
like we have a police captain now that will entertain all the ideas, whether he can do anything about it or not.
I
At
think
least
that's
he's willing to entertain it.
Yes, and Mayor and Trustees, I think that that's definitely something we can set up here in the next couple months to set that up with Fred and the captain and you all to kind of do that. One other thing, as you mentioned, you know, maybe we want to go to 30,000. So for the full year in fiscal year 25, it would be 50,000, what we're talking about right now. But just to give you an understanding of just the difference, for one full-time deputy to have here, it's about 192,000 with the payroll of vehicle, tactical plans, everything. And of course, we can't just have one deputy because they can't be 24/7. So just as for the price and for the cost, what you're seeing, just to give you that information as well.
And one more comment on that. The captain told me that it's a better situation if this individual is assigned to BCSO, because then if there is a catastrophic crash on Paseo del Norte or someplace else, and that deputy needs to respond, there isn't an issue about the deputy saying, well, I only work in the village. You get what I'm saying? So it's really a much better situation if this individual is assigned to the BCSO. And the bottom line is we're saving money. We're actually saving money. Okay?
one other thing that's both, those are very good points, both of them. One other point is I worry sometimes about the area north of Paseo that's in the village and wonder if they get the same kind of service that the rest of the village gets. And so maybe in that MOU,
Yes.
we ask that they have a even coverage throughout the village, because I see them in this part of the village, but I don't really know on Ortega Road what, you know.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
If I can go back also to your comment, which is a better way to handle it? Would we be better off to, just for the sake of budgeting and just for the sake of being out front a little bit, you know, changing this contract services for public safety to 30,000? Because we're just planning ahead that the day when Fred retires, we're already budgeted a little bit ahead there? Or are we better off doing a bar where you would come to us at that point and say, well, Fred's retired, you know, we're gonna have to make a bar for this position. Which is better from our county and with the state way to handle it?
So, Mayor, Trustees, anytime I don't have to do a bar, it's less work. So we definitely have the ability to move the 23 up to 30,000 and still be in excess. So I can definitely make that change in the budget if that's something you would like to see.
I'm sort of feeling like with that position and Maria's, I'd rather be over budgeted in case
Something
happens.
does happen.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, we thought about that and we're ahead of it a little bit.
And it's just budgeting at this point.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
That's correct.
And every year, Mayor and Trustees, the amount that's billed by Fred is lower than we've budgeted. So it's just insurance.
So I guess, I don't know, I would make, you know, I would like to see for both positions, I don't know.
Some increase.
7,000, what do you all feel?
That seems like a good range.
You know, what kind of numbers should we have them change the budget?
Maybe it's a percentage instead of in thousands. You know, maybe, I don't know.
15% higher or something?
Yeah,
Say
10%.
15 is a reasonable number. 15% is reasonable,
So let's-
quite reasonable.
And that's not saying we're spending that. That's
No.
just in the budget.
That is correct.
That makes sense.
So hopefully we won't have to spend that for
Right.
several years. But
The day is
it's in
coming.
there and we're ahead of the game.
They're not allowed to leave.
That's right.
One other question, where is the 50,000 showing up, or the 25,000?
So that actually would come out of the 209 fund, which is the, you have a summary of it at the very back of your packet. It is the, the 211 fund, the Law Enforcement Protection Fund. That's where the MOU expense would be showing there.
I see.
And so that, it's, right
That's
now
where
it's
the-
showing 0 because it usually starts at 0, ends at 0 because we have whatever we have from LEPF must be spent in that fiscal year unless we tell the state we're saving it. We can save it for 1 year if BCSO needs it, like to buy a vehicle, but they've given me everything that they're gonna be spending, so they'll be spending everything this year. And then same thing with the MOU. The MOU that year, whatever they spend from it, they can spend up to the amount we designate, and then it starts over the following year. They don't get to roll that over.
I see.
Okay, now we're still on page 5 of 7 of the general fund comparison. This is the 1960 Public Facilities Department. So this is the department that houses our facility manager and all of our maintenance staff. And for the top portion of the wages for payroll, we have an increase here because we are budgeting for an extra maintenance position. We are at the point now where we just have so many different areas to cover, different projects, and to get those projects done, we definitely need another facilities person. So we have budgeted for that, and if approved, we would start advertising for that in May to hopefully fill that at the beginning of the year. And we have then pulled out in the second line, the wages temporary, a temporary person. So in the past, we've had somebody come in temporary, usually a college student, and come in and help through some of the area where he's available in the summer. So we're pulling that out to make room for the full-time person that we have budgeted for this year. And that's really the major change in the payroll. Below that, in the non-payroll expenses for the public facilities, pretty much there's a lot of items that stay the same. In the maintenance of building and structure, we have budgeted their security upgrades for Village Hall. And we also have for a new conference room / workstation, and for roof and door repair at Miller's Feed. I mentioned earlier that they're a tenant of ours and we own that property, so we have to do some repairs there. Another line item I want to just bring your attention to and kind of explain what's in there is the 44030 maintenance grounds roadway line item. It's the third line item down in the non-payroll expenses. And here we have some of our bigger maintenance projects. We have tree trimming at many of the different areas, the Agri-Nature Center, in right-of-ways and at parks. We also have tree trimming for Paseo del Norte trees for that property. Cleaning of 4th Street drains and infiltrators. So now that we own 4th Street, that's all on us, so we have some maintenance for that. We also have a pretty big project in here, and it is 14 to 16 infiltrators throughout the village, through the village roads. So we had started that project. We did a few last fiscal year. We've done some this fiscal year. We did about 10 this year. We're seeing that they're working. It's a great project, and it's actually helping in a lot of roads. So we have 14 to 16 more that we plan to do through different village roads. And Keene has, a list of the different village roads, and we're starting to go through that list and make sure that all of these roads are draining properly throughout the village, and making sure we've heard the residents on that area.
Tammy, are we looking at maybe some of the older infiltrators that were installed? I mean, are we looking at the maintenance of those and some of those having to be, replaced because of age or whatever, Are we keeping track of those as well?
Mayor, Trustee Pacheco, those can be cleaned out. They're pretty easily maintained. So we don't need to replace any of the ones that we've put in the last couple of years.
Okay, and then how are we, or how is Keene deciding which locations are kind of next on the list? Because, I mean, there's places all over the village, I think that, especially after a big storm, we see that there
Yes.
are issues.
Mayor, Trustee Pacheco, we just put together the magazine, and I looked at some of the historical pictures of the village and most of the valley, and it was a low area that flooded. So it's no wonder that we have roadways that are a mess after a rainstorm, for sure. So in addition to our road CIP, our crew drives around and notices where the low spots are, where we're seeing problems. We also get calls from constituents, from residents. For example, Edgewood Lane, that area right by the park, those shoulders are continuously wet and muddy. So we're putting some infiltrators in there. But yeah, we keep an ongoing list, and we do what we can. And I think it's a great low-cost solution to an ongoing problem.
And I don't know if this is even a possibility, but it would be, I think, a pretty great idea to get like some drone footage after a storm of the entire village, just to kind of see if there are places that maybe we're missing or that are going to become problem areas if we don't do something about. I mean, I don't even know what the cost of that would be, but I think that would.
We have a drone. We could certainly do that. It's a great idea.
Excellent.
I have another idea that takes it to another level, which I think we ought to consider. And, I'm putting my landscape architect hat on here, but I think each of those infiltrators, we're doing work all over the Southwest, actually, including Arizona, with green stormwater infrastructure. And those are the perfect solutions for those infiltrators. A good example is that I could see a grove of even cottonwoods in that infiltrator at the Buffalo Curve, where that little triangular piece of property is, and that's just going to further the way the village looks, the positive way that the village looks. And I know we were talking about even increasing the number of trees in the village, and I think we could do it that way. And if we were smart, we could do infiltrators throughout the village that also feed, say, cottonwoods or other kinds of vegetation that would help improve the aesthetics of the village, as well as using that stormwater in a positive way. Just saying.
Great idea.
Good idea.
Excuse me.
Okay, and there's two other line items in that, two other items in this line item I wanted to just address. We have money for 4th Street sidewalk repair, and then we have money for the landscaping maintenance of 4th Street. So we contract out a company to do that because it's just too overwhelming on our staff to try and get that whole stretch done. It just takes up too much of their time. So those are the items that are in the maintenance grounds roadway line. And then in the maintenance vehicles, furnitures, fixtures, we just have maintenance here for every single one of our vehicles, including tractors, sweepers. Keene does a really great job of knowing exactly the costs on, oil changes or tires. And so we have budgeted here in case we have any issues with any of our vehicles so that we can get those repaired and make sure that they're in working order to just service the village.
And there again, we could have leftover money.
Absolutely, yes. Let's see here. And then in the supplies for 1960 in the public facilities, the one item, it's normal supplies that they would need, but one of the items The larger items budgeted here is to replace 100 to 150 signs throughout the village. So we've budgeted every year to kind of start that. We've done some this year, and we are continuing on that project to make sure we get signs that need replaced so that they look nice and are up to code, to make sure that they aren't faded and bleached.
So these are just replacement of signs. This is not taking into consideration any new signage that we may want to put up?
Mayor, Trustee Pacheco, we are considering some new signs. In fact, we are getting a template for signs. First, for the parking lot on 4th Street that has no sign. We're finally getting a sign up there, and that template will be spread throughout. So a normal traffic sign is about $75 to $150, like stop ahead, slow for children, that kind of traditional traffic sign that we order through a traffic supply company. But then there are some of our wonderful signs that we love, like the wooden sign at the north end that says entering Village of Los Ranchos. The one at the south end is starting to deteriorate. We need to upgrade that. We need to put a better sign at the Agri-Nature Center. We're gonna do some nicer signs. One that you mentioned actually in one of the meetings, Trustee Pacheco, entering from on Osuna, as you turn from 2nd Street. We are going to start putting some of those signs that say, and this also came out of our Business and Economic Development Advisory Committee, if you recall, that we need more signage. In fact, I think one of our friends in the audience also had suggested that. And it's true, people don't know when they've come into the village. And I know Trustee Radnovich has also pushed for sort of a banner sign or some kind of a monument sign entering into our beautiful new 4th Street area. So those are the kinds of things that we want to do with that sign money.
And when you say a template, will we see that template before it's actually placed, or is that just something that staff works on? And
We are happy to bring that template to you.
that would be great. And are we doing bigger? Or is it really just kind of still working within the framework of the signage that's currently up?
I don't know that we have fully designed the signs.
Okay.
But we'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, Trustees, that is the last item that I had, that I wanted to bring or call special attention to. So if you have any additional questions.
I do. Go ahead, George.
It's just a simple one, I think. So we're contracting to a landscape maintenance company for 4th Street.
Yes.
Did we go through a selection process? And who do we have?
We have Yellowstone Landscaping.
Okay. Thanks.
So I'm not sure if this is the place to inject it, but I'm going to. For the other trustees, Keenan had a discussion, I guess, with the solar company who had made a presentation to him about possibly doing the parking lot. Pretty nice presentation.
Unfortunately.
No.
Here.
Here.
Uh-huh.
Where, it's one of these things where it costs quite a bit of money, but, it'd be like 15 years to recover the cost. But what he's sort of looking at was, I think it's about 25,000, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, maybe Ann, you can tell me, to get them started. And so I think it's something that trustees need to discuss. I don't know if it'll be at an actual meeting, or if this is a place to talk about putting that 25,000 in the budget to continue to pursue down this line with doing some kind of,
Environmental.
here or at the
Bless you.
growers market where you've got actually some covered parking. So Ann, you
So
can take it
yes,
more.
so no, this is a perfect time to talk about this. It is in our capital projects, not in this facilities, but it is under Keene's jurisdiction. So let's talk about solar. We had actually budgeted in this fiscal year 23, to get started on permitting and some engineering and some just specs on what it would cost to get to net zero for the village. We've only taken baby steps at this point, but the cost is pretty high. So next year, the costs that we've gotten would be $500,000 to do all solar net zero for the village. It would take us 17 years to just get back to zero. Our overall utility budget is only $60,000 a year. So it's a huge number for the village to absorb on its own, in its own general fund. If it's something that the board and mayor really want, I would suggest going for capital outlay, putting this on our ICIP, and really kind of approaching the legislature and doing an overall overhaul of Village Hall at that point, getting the ADA bathrooms that we've been talking about, doing the remodel, putting the solar on. It's a big expense. We definitely put that off to the side. It was a lot higher than we thought.
Right.
Now, if we just want to talk about solar panels or something sort of a smaller, we can do that. But the initial cost estimate was pretty staggering.
Right. So I think that's something that we need to think about. I think, again, you look at it from the standpoint of what are we doing for the constituents? And it's good or bad. I mean, there's a side of me that says, you know, there's been some talk about doing some kind of foundation or something. Would that be something this foundation would pursue?
And Mayor Trust,
Versus getting the government out of it, sort of.
and Mayor Trustees, that's kind of what I looked at when we were budgeting is, it was, the total was 520,000. And so when I saw that number and seeing, I went back, I looked at how much, and 60,000 is total for all our utilities, water, gas, electric. So electric isn't even, it's maybe not even 2/3 of that total number. And so that's how I came up with how long it's gonna take us to recoup that. And when I saw that, my thought is 500,000 could definitely be used in better ways to serve the constituents. And so that's why we parked that aside, and we can look at either getting capital outlay, maybe looking, like Ann said, at a smaller project that still gets us to absorb some of that cost for our electric, but we're still able to use that money to do other projects that actually are serving the constituents.
One other thought about that. I think we can go beyond where we're going, and to be honest, $500,000 does not seem that expensive to me. To get to net zero, really? That seems cheap to me. But the other thing that it makes me think about is, you know, the federal government right now anyway is really pushing sustainability and resilience. And so, you know, are there ways we can look for grants through the federal government?
Probably.
I'm sure. Yeah, exactly, Mayor. And then the other thing that strikes me is I could envision solar power going in many places in the village that go beyond Village Hall. For instance, how great would it be to have, you know, solar over the parking spaces where the growers market is, so that they have instant shade as well as creating power. So it's, and the barn could reap some of the benefits from that. So, I mean, it's just the right direction we should be taking, and we need to be forward thinking about it. And when we take that direction, you know, I think it needs to be planned so that we're attacking the areas we think are the best ones first, and then move from there to others.
Yeah, this is a
I'm not sure
multiple-year.
I'm not sure I'd put the hall as part of that, but probably.
But even the parking lot on 4th Street, right? I mean, if we did something there
Sure.
and what it could do on 4th Street, especially with our vision for 4th Street in the future, it would reap the benefits, I think. But you're right, I think we need to put a plan in place that is over time versus maybe just a big chunk of money thrown at it at one
This is
time.
one company coming in and making
Right.
Right.
a very grand presentation. And so I thought this was a perfect time to just discuss it. It sounds good, but I think it's a much bigger issue. It would take a much better plan and a longer range plan than just throwing something on the budget.
Exactly, and I appreciate your comment about the shade structure, because ground mounted is very different than roof mounted.
Right.
So it's all of those nuances that we really have to kind of dig down a little bit, for sure.
Well, and I think we have to decide how deep the commitment is, you know, of spending village money. I mean, we've got a lot of commitments out there.
Yes.
Look at our
Yes.
ACIP and, you know, the loan we've done on Del Norte open space.
Yes.
And so I think we have to be very prudent about,
How we spend.
yeah, or what we're committing to.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think my feeling would be like I think we continue to pursue it as to massaging a long-range plan.
And keeping our eyes open for those opportunities, those grant opportunities that I think we're gonna see more of moving forward. And gosh, we live in in one of the best places to capture solar power. So I think it's something that we have to consider.
We actually did consider solar power for 4th Street when we first started. On the mayor's bidding, actually, at the time. Nice.
There are no further comments on the public facilities. We can go to page 6 of 7.
I suggest a 5-minute break, just so we can
Absolutely.
stretch and
Good idea.
get some water, or snack or whatever.
Thanks, Mayor.
Yep, something.
Snack time. Yeah.
I don't know about snack.
Well, there's snacks out there.
Yeah, I can't believe they're changing iPads just so you can advance your plans.
Yeah, I need
I'm doing it more.
Are you?
Yeah.
Good, see? I'm
Because it takes me 10 minutes to do, what is this? Yeah. Exactly. Oh, wait, I forgot the throttle. One of my buddies is a fireworker, so he said, and I did 2 partials in my life. He said, so much you can, it's perfect. I don't want to talk to that person because my right knee is starting to. No, I know I'm going to need a replacement. It's coming. But do I get the full or do I get the partial? Yeah, this depends on when you look at it. They might say you're not even a candidate, not even a candidate for a partial. I'm gonna try to say. Good Lord. Oh, you took that. Good, really good.
I know, we're all like, haven't been able to like peel an orange or do anything like that, but I can finally like grab with my left and. Yeah, no, I can. full-on plaster cast. They don't even do that anymore, apparently. Yeah. I know, it's crazy. And they even said, I know, because then you had, like, it itched and everything. I know. But honestly, like, when I first broke it, I was like, I don't even, because I didn't want anything touching me. Yeah. Oh, my God.
Move the holes closer together. 30 acres.
Oh,
And then you could put,
actually, that's part of what's happening.
they had like 25 courses.
Oh, wow. This was like a development company.
Yeah, we could redo the golf course and still have a nice golf.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's exactly what happened on this course. Because, 30 acres, it's probably about, golf course is 180 acres more or less. Was given to a developer as part of the deal to develop one part of the space around the course with the intention that he has to provide, trailheads, with the trails in the resort. So he just had to provide the trailheads. He's good, really good. It's hard, yeah.
Paul's been going really well.
Wish the sun was really right here.
I know.
So it may be the same.
We, so our front yard, our front windows face east. So every year we go from, sunlight over to here, and then we would go to the second window, now it's to the third window. So it's usually getting Chris, in the winter time, and it gets me in the spring and summertime, because of our side of the couch. But it's amazing how that changes. And your kids, granddaughter, everybody good?
Oh, yeah, they're having fun. My granddaughter's starting to play basketball.
Is she?
She's loving it.
Where's she at school?
Sunset. She's been there for 7 years. She'll be graduating in May. And then she'll go to school at South Dakota. Charter school.
Yeah, it is.
How old is she now?
10, maybe 11 in June.
Fifth grade?
Oh.
You ready to start again, Danielle? Yes. Okay. Go ahead, Tammy.
Okay, Mayor, Trustees, we are again on page 6 of 7 of the general fund comparison, the Agricultural Enterprises 1970 Department. And this houses our ag manager, our ag assistant, administrative assistant, and animal control, animal husbandry, and also our temporary farmer that we budget for. So those are the 4 positions you'll see in the payroll in this department. Again, this one did increase for payroll because we moved the animal control, animal husbandry out of the planning and zoning department into the agricultural department this year. So that's the big increase you see in the payroll expenditures. In the non-payroll expenditures, which is the second portion of the
Wait, can I back you up, Tammy? What,
Yes.
what's the increase in temporary? Is that the farmer?
That is the farmer. The reason why it's an increase this year is because the farmer that we had in fiscal year '23, he was with us for a couple months, and then he was unable to continue due to some para issues. He's a retired firefighter, I believe, and so they para said that he could not continue until he potentially got stuff sorted out. So he left earlier than we anticipated, and normally through the winter we don't have a farmer, and now at the end of the fiscal year we normally bring one back now for the spring season, so that the rest of that will increase. If we can get someone in here, that'll increase from here to the end of the year. So it'll be closer to what we're budgeting again.
Okay, thank you.
And then in the non-payroll expenditures, there's not much that has changed here. We pulled the utilities out of this department and put them in the facilities department. So that's the very last line item. You see a drop to 0 there. And then we pulled out the maintenance of vehicles, furnitures, fixtures, and equipment out of here, and moved it over to the facilities department, as Keen budgeted for maintenance on all of our equipment and vehicles. And let's see here, the one item that increased sizably is the professional services and the supplies. So for professional services, we actually don't anticipate such a large increase. Again, there's just some invoices that we haven't received at this point for some of the services that have been provided. So that will actually not be a very large increase when it comes time for the final budget. But for the supplies, we just had an increase based on the activities and the plans that Joshua has for the Agri-Nature Center and the planting and whatever he's gonna have to buy for next year's plans. So again, this one has stayed pretty much the same. And if there's any questions on any of these line items, we can go ahead and go through those now.
So on the supplies where you say that Joshua's kind of budgeting for future, I'm assuming classes or events, those kind of things, is there a list of what he's actually planning for, the increase?
Yes, so mayor's trustees. So actually, this year for fiscal year 23, it's actually a decrease of what we budgeted. So for fiscal year 23, we budgeted 19,000 in supplies. So what you're seeing there is just what we have expended and then annualized through the end of the year. A lot of his spending comes in the spring because he's getting the seeds, he's getting all the soil, the fertilizers, everything for planting season. And so a lot of his expense will come now towards this last quarter. So that's why, one of the reasons why you're seeing such a low amount at the moment. However, for next fiscal year, for what he budgeted for, he has small amounts for tools, office supplies, signage, little things, but then he has in here a good budget for livestock support, purchasing of livestock, chicken coops, aquaponics, a good supply for ag growing supplies, the plants, the seeding trays, compost, seeds, and then for a grain program, grain cleaning and harvesting equipment. So he does have a budget in there for different projects and items, but it is a decrease from what we budgeted this year.
And Mayor, if I, Trustee Pacheco, if I could also elaborate, the pollinator garden will go in this spring. We have a new community garden that we're going to be planting and adding to. The grain project is coming online, so there's a lot of project money in this as well.
Thank you.
Were there any further questions?
I have a couple of questions, or actually, it's more of a comment, actually. How big is the Agri-Nature Center? Where does the land boundaries go?
It's 23 acres, approximately 23 acres.
So it's the land at the Buffalo Curb.
Exactly.
It is the land that the Agri-Nature Center sits on.
Yes.
Up to the El Pueblo lateral, is it, on the east
I'm
side?
not sure if it's called the El Pueblo, but it's that ditch.
Gregos lateral.
Gregos lateral.
That's the name of it.
And then to the south, it's up to the subdivision that you live in, trustee. And then it ends about where the Schulte house was moved to.
No, the Schulte house is just in the middle of it, basically.
Oh.
It's in the middle. It goes all the way to the Buffalo.
So it goes over to McCall's property?
No, 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 no. Anderson,
before
where
the
the Anderson
Anderson
home is, correct?
I got it. It seems to me that we ought to budget some, we're doing enough things out there that are, I don't want to call them ad hoc, but they're not part of a bigger plan. And it seems to me that we ought to do a master plan for the Agri-Nature Center at some point. Because it's gotten big enough, and, you know, there may be other lands that come up that help to increase it. And it's also part of, in at least some ways, the cities, Anderson Fields, and the counties. And I think it's at a point where we might want to start looking at a master plan just for the Agri-Nature Center that includes not just the physical land planning, but programs and what it wants to be when it grows up, where its future is going as the Agri-Nature
I will
Center.
throw this out on the table. We have essentially that. We have an Agri-Futures program that's been going on for 4 years. And that Agri-Futures program is in essence the master plan, not just for the Agri-Nature Center, but all activities relating to agriculture that enable us to work with Rio Grande Community Farm, with other farmers in the area. So I think while it might not be called a master plan per se, it essentially is a master plan. It's the Agri-Futures program, and it's gonna go on probably, and I would say for at least another 3-4 years. It may go on for a long, long time, and it's evolving. Go ahead if you have.
Yeah, Mayor and Trustee Redmond, no, it's a great idea, and the quarterly agriculture committee meetings are an opportunity to check in with the committee to give us guidance and support. So we have a couple of different ways that we get ideas for the operation of that facility. It's both initiative by our program manager, it's the mayor's initiative, it's the Agri-Futures, and it's the Ag Committee. So sometimes I feel like poor Joshua has a lot of bosses, but no, your point is well taken about a master plan. You're welcome to come down to the Ag Center at any point in time, and we can show you the plan that we are kind of working off of, that we continually get input from our Ag Committee. In fact, we just had a very large Ag Committee meeting that looked at sort of the overall direction for the fields and where we're putting things and where the pollinator garden is going and what the roadway alignment's gonna look like and where the statue is going to be placed and all of that. And we got great buy-in and great feedback.
Is that the committee that Chuck Lucas is on?
Correct.
Ah, got it. I'd love to come. I think I couldn't last time. I had something going, but I'll do you have your schedule
Yes. And we
planned
can
out ahead?
absolutely include you.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks, Ann.
Are there any further questions on the agricultural department? Okay, so we can move on to page 7 of 7 then. This is the last operational department, which is right at the top. It's the Fire 2000 department. This is for our EMS and fire services with the county. It's an MOU that we have with them. It does increase 3% this year to $480,800. And just as a side note on that, this is the last year of that contract. We have to renegotiate that MOU next year. And so we definitely want to do that with Chief Perez here in the next couple months. And there will potentially be quite an increase. When we first put that MOU in place, it was 15 years ago. So next year that could jump up sizably. So as soon as we have that meeting and we have those numbers in negotiation, we will definitely share those with you.
This is one that kind of comes to us, though, that is passed through, correct?
Mayor and Trustee Pacheco, no, this is just for, this is our money and this is what we pay. We have a fire protection fund. It's Fund 211, I believe. I'm sorry, 209, and we get money from the state there. We do get a pass-through. What we received this year was about $150,000, and that is passed through directly to them. So that's part of what they consider when we negotiate this MOU, is what we're getting from the state plus our portion.
And do we feel like that could increase or decrease? I mean, what are we feeling?
So Mayor, Trustees, that one has increased slightly every year. Excuse me, not anything, I believe from last year to this year, it was close to about $20,000 difference, maybe 30,000 of what it increased. So it has increased every year, but it's not anything very sizable compared to the total of what we're paying.
So this could definitely change our budget
Yes.
in the next year.
Yes.
Mayor, Trustee Pacheco, just to clarify, not this budget year, but next budget year.
Would some of it go into this budget year in the spring or something?
Mayor, Trustees, no, this 480,000 covers us through the fiscal year.
Okay.
So we budget this on the fiscal year since we know the exact amount.
Tammy Ann, have we approached the fire department, and do we know kind of what it might increase by in coming years?
So Mayor, Trustee Radnovich, Trustees, yes, Fred has been in talk with with Chief Perez, and he has, let him know that they've started negotiations with some of the other entities that have had their MOUs expire or they're expiring. The one that he did mention to Fred that they just renegotiated was with Sandia Labs, and that one went up to about 1.2 million. And so he did say that one was renegotiated. When I talked to Fred, just when he was thinking, based on what it was, kind of the increases, he's thinking 700,000 to 800,000 potentially, and that might be on the high end, but it could be as high as that.
Wow. Something to plan for.
Yes.
Do we have a good way to start to look at integrating that kind of amount of money into our budget now? Or have you already done that?
So Mayor, Trustees, the one way that we kind of look at that is when we're budgeting with an excess, because then we start the new fiscal year with a higher dollar amount than what we've expended. And so that's kind of one of the things that we've, over the last 3 years, so when I first came in, the budget year that I first was here for, we actually had a deficit budget because of everything going on. And that's something that we've changed to truly try and make sure is that every year we budget with an excess so that we have money for these things that are coming up, and we know the prices are going to increase.
Yeah, this is really an important one. I mean, that fire alarm, I mean, it goes off all the time. So this is in excess, this budget that we're seeing is in excess of what we think we'll need.
Yes, that is correct, and we are just about to get to that point. So this concludes the operational expenses for the general fund. And now through the rest of this page, you're going to see a summary of the general fund revenues and operational expenses. And if you look at column D, about a little more than halfway down the page, you'll see total fund expenditures of $3,113,024. That is the amount of the operational expenses.
And where is that, Tammy? What page are you on?
7 of 7, column D.
7. Okay, column D.
D.
Okay, I see it now, yeah.
And so that is the total expenses prior to any capital purchases and transfers. So just below that, we have our capital expenses. And so in the capital expenses, we have a few projects that we have listed out. And so for the capital projects, the first line item is the building and structure. And so in this, a capital, just for reference, capital purchases are anything over $5,000 that are going to be depreciated over a useful life. And the first one, building and structures, we have 3 projects listed in here. The first one is restuccoing a village hall. This is something that we've been needing to do for a couple years, and we've put it off based on doing other projects. So we have that budgeted this year. One of the other reasons that we had put this off is we need windows as well, but it makes sense to do both of those projects at the same time. So we have both restuccoing and high efficiency windows for Village Hall. And the last item in this project is it's half of a project. It's to resurface the tennis courts. So we budgeted half of the expense in this fund and half of it in the Rescue Act. And the Rescue Act will go over after we finish the general fund. But so for this line item, we have 3 projects budgeted for the $191,000.
Tammy, can I ask a quick question? Resurfacing the tennis courts, how often does that happen?
I think, Mayor Trustee Pacheco, it's once every 7 to 8 years. And the courts were resurfaced 10 years ago.
Right.
And what about the mesh covers around the tennis courts?
So Mayor, Trustees, that's actually part of maintenance, and that actually gets replaced more often, and that is part of Keene's budget when he sees that, and I believe it was last year that he did replace those. So those get replaced as needed through the maintenance line items.
Okay, so I mean, wind obviously plays a big part in that, whether they're falling apart or not. So that just happens on a regular basis, but the resurfacing takes place every 7 to 8 years. And do we do it all at one time? Do we do half of the courts at one time? How does that happen?
So Mayor, Trustees, you can do 1 court at a time. We looked at that last year and we were gonna do half of them because of the large cost that it is to resurface them all. But what we did was we called someone out. We were able to fix one of the really big cracks, and he said, you can probably go 1 more year. We did that. And now at this point, we're gonna resurface all of them at once so that they're on the same time schedule.
Not only that, but the economies of scale work out that it's a little bit better to do them all at once.
Okay, and the restrooms there, are those part of maintenance, or do we kind of budget for those as well?
Mayor Trustee Pacheco, those are part of the maintenance, and it's an ongoing daily maintenance activity.
Okay, and then now it just keeps going. What about the handball courts? Are those redone on a regular basis, or how are we doing those?
So Mayor, Trustees, you actually bring up a good point. Is that where one of the pickleball is going? No. So those ones are also same thing, maintenance required. I don't know when the last time
Those are slightly different. On a tennis court surface, it's like an asphalt. The handball, I believe, are concrete. And I don't think those have been done since I moved into the village, frankly.
No, they have not. They don't really need maintenance because it's concrete until they really start to decompose.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I just have not been in one of those since my kids were little. I had no idea if those were repaired on a regular basis or not.
And handball's kind of fallen a little bit out of favor. I mean, it's not really a popular sport anymore.
And while we're on this topic, they are actually used, believe it or not, and you can use, you can play, not lacrosse, but what is it, squash and racquetball in those courts. So they are used. The one facility that isn't as well used is the singles court, which is where the basketball hoops are. We're going to keep the basketball hoops up, but we're going to convert that to a pickleball.
And that is actually in the next line item for the equipment and machinery. That's where we budgeted to put the pickleball at Hartnett Park.
And we had also talked, again, just keep moving down the line here. We had talked about the playground equipment in the park. And of course, that's not been replaced since my kids were little. And I know we talked about this probably a year or 2 ago. Mm-hmm. Where are we with trying to revamp or replace or update?
So the Mayor, Trustee Pacheco, the playground equipment is in a couple of places. if you recall, we were able to put sort of lifestyle and recreation and healthy living funding in the Rescue Act, in buckets in the Rescue Act. So we put a little bit for Edgewood Park for some playground equipment and upgrades, and a little bit in Hartnett Park. This playground equipment is pretty good, in pretty good shape. Yes, it's maybe dated in terms of like new technology, but the minute you touch playground equipment, you have to totally upgrade it to the new way of ADA and all of that. And right now we have sand under there. We would have to remove all that sand and put bark chips and the special kind of
Rubberized asphalt.
rubberized asphalt or whatever it is that is the new way of handling children on equipment. So it's a much bigger project than we thought. We hope to be able to one by one get some of those pieces of playground equipment upgraded, but we are going to take the funding from the Rescue Act to do the tennis courts, because right now those are a liability. There are big cracks that if someone trips and falls, that's a liability on the village. So we have exposure on the tennis courts. So we're going to work on the tennis courts first. We're going to do the playground equipment second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next capital line item, we did.
One other question, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Before you move on. The high-efficiency windows, we're actually going to be able to replace just the windows, just the glass part, not the actual frame of the windows.
Mayor Trustee
That seems really
I would have to get with Keen on that to see exactly what the quote that he has is for.
Yeah,
I believe it's just the windows, but I'm not completely sure about that.
it seems like that's
The
too
frame,
cheap.
glass.
you gotta do some stucco
That seems
work.
way too cheap.
Oh, it's cheap.
Well, I mean, 191,000 doesn't seem like it would cover the whole windows.
I don't know. We'll have to find out.
Huh. Yeah, just curious, because that would be a really good price.
And then, so the second line item, equipment and machinery, we went over that's to do a pickleball court at Hartnett Park. The third capital line item is for roadways, bridges, and culverts. And what we have budgeted here is a culvert at Ortega. This is the only item we have budgeted here. The last capital projects is the other column, other category. And in here we have two items for Edgewood Park. We have Edgewood Park irrigation and Edgewood Park fencing. And at that time, those are the capital items that we have in the general fund. I would like to just note some of the other capital items that are not in the general fund. Ann did mention the other half of resurfacing the tennis court, which is coming out of the Rescue Act. And then in the road fund, our matches for all of our different projects around the village. We have Chavez Road, and we have match for that money. We have co-op money to fix the cracks and resurface or restriping. And then we have the TPF funds for both fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24. We have our matches in the road fund for that as well. So those you don't see in here, but those are other capital projects that are happening as well.
Tammy, you mentioned that the third line item, the 080, was for Ortega?
Yes.
What is that? I didn't know we were doing anything.
It's a culvert.
It's a culvert that needs to be replaced. So MRGCD will do the work to replace the culvert, but we have to fund the work.
Oh, at the ditch that goes through there. Oh, yeah,
Yes. And the last item on this general fund budget that we want to talk about is the transfer in and out. So transfers in and out are when you are moving money in or out of the general fund to another fund. And we have one transfer in budgeted, and that's $20,000 from the farm camp fund, which was the 505 fund. We're moving $20,000 into here to cover a new truck for the Agri-Nature Center. In fiscal year '23, the one that we're in right now, we budgeted 20,000 from farm camps into general fund for a used truck. However, he was unable to find something after looking, and so now he's able to find he was able to find a new truck, and we are actually going to purchase it this year. We have half of it already transferred in, and then we're just transferring the remainder to cover that on July 1.
So this is just the remainder, because a truck, you can't buy a truck for $20,000.
You can't.
Correct. That is just the remainder.
Problem.
I see.
Yes.
I see.
And then we have transfers. So we have transfers out that we just want to fund different funds for different reasons. So FEMA, we have a match that we have. We have a FEMA grant. We have about $30,000 of a match that we need to cover. And then we have $25,000 right now that we talked about for the law protection, the Law Enforcement Protection Fund, the MOU with the BCSO. And then we have potential to transfer out money to the General Obligation Fund. This is for the reserve because, as we've done in the past, if there isn't enough coming in from property taxes to cover what we owe in our bond payment, we have that deficit to make up. And so with the new bond that was approved, we may have to pull more money out of general fund to cover those bond payments. So we have that. And then like we've done in the past every year, putting money into, let's see here. I'm sorry, not in the past every year, in the road fund. This is new with the GRT. So to potentially cover the amount that we need to cover in the road fund for those matches that we have coming up, we have money that we may potentially need to transfer over to meet. At the beginning, when we talked about the GRT allocation, I noted, and I'm not sure if you caught it, but I said that for us to meet just the $3.5 million match that we have to make for the $27 million project, we would need to transfer $567,000 a year starting this fiscal year 24, to meet just that match. That does not include any other matches for any other projects. And so if we don't have enough from GRT, or if we decide not to do the GRT, then we have that transfer that we would have to move into our road fund. So that's budgeted there as well. And those are the...
Can you walk me through that again?
Yes.
It's a lot of transferring and moving.
Yes.
So the transfer comes from where and goes where?
And do you want me to walk you through each one or just that road fund?
If you could a little bit.
I would like each one.
I'm thinking about the public listening to this too, trying to go,
Okay.
wait, where's it going? And I think this is
So,
something that needs to be very
If you would,
clear and very transparent as to where these monies come from and
absolutely.
where they go.
So if you want to turn to the last page in your packet, and it's the cash balance summary. That'll give you all the funds that I'm talking about. So the first fund, the first transfer, if you look almost to the bottom of the funds, there's the 505 Agri-Nature Center Farm Camps. You can see there in the middle column, $20,000. That is because we're moving, and it's a negative $20,000. We are moving $20,000 out of that farm camps fund, and we are moving it into the general fund. And that is to cover the second portion of the new vehicle that we are purchasing for the Agri-Nature Center.
So coming from the Agri-Nature Center for the Agri-Nature Center in terms of the...
Yes, and the reason we're doing it that way is because we have a line item in the general fund already to purchase equipment. We don't have one budgeted in the farm camps fund. So we would have to do a bar just to do that. Instead of doing that, we're just going to transfer it into our general fund and pull it out of there. So that's just accounting technicality.
So clearly, the vehicle that we're purchasing out of this fund is for Agri-Nature Center?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is the only transfer we're doing where money is coming into the general fund. The the 4 other transfers we have budgeted, that is all money going out of the general fund into some other fund. So the first one is you have $29,781 coming out of the general fund and moving into the 309 fund, which is the Federal Emergency Management Act Fund.
Sorry, what's that amount again?
29,781
That's moving
out of the general fund
out of general fund.
and into the 309, which is the FEMA fund. And that is a match that's required for that grant that we were awarded. The third transfer is again coming out of the general fund and into the Law Enforcement Protection Fund, which is the 211 fund,
How much is that?
25,000. That's the amount that we talked about.
Unless you wanted to bump that up.
Correct. So that's what we have budgeted right now for the MOU for the BCSO services. The fourth transfer out is for the general obligation bond. And the general obligation bond, it's the reserve fund 410. And what we do is we evaluate every year how much we received in property taxes to cover our principal payments. And if there's a deficit, we move money to cover that deficit. This year, we have the new bond that was approved, so we will have a second bond payment. So there is potential for us needing to move money out to cover the difference between what we get in property taxes and what is actually owed in principal payment.
That's what we anticipate if we make a purchase of open space,
Correct.
okay?
And
that amount that you're transferring is,
That's 300,000, and the reason for that is right now with just the current bond we have, there are times when we do have to make up a deficit already because we don't have a high property tax. So there will be at least a small portion needed if we have the second bond go through and we have a payment for that, then we will have a higher amount that needs to come out of the general fund.
right, okay.
Aren't we currently spending 300,000?
Yeah, our current principal payment for the current bond this past year was about 330,000. And our property tax, which we don't have everything in yet, but our property tax will potentially be under that already. We'll get a big chunk in June and we'll see kind of where we're at with that.
Just as a comment, I feel like that would be something that would be worthwhile to be in the village vision or something to explain. You know, a lot of people think, wow, you make all this money off property taxes. And I don't know how many times I've had that conversation that no, we don't. And so I think as a point of education for people to just explain property taxes and what our portion is.
There is no property tax
There
here.
really is no revenue.
Isn't it a 1 mil? There is a 1 mil
Yeah.
that was passed
So-
in 2007.
Right, and so I think that needs
Pretty
to
minimal.
be explained to people, just as a point of clarification and for their understanding, as well as
I agree.
trustees, you know, for me. It took me a long time to figure that out, so.
We can do that, thanks.
And then the last transfer is a transfer out of the general fund into the road fund, which is the 216 fund.
And that is the 45,000,
That's 500,000.
500,000.
That's the money we're moving into our,
For the match.
for the match.
For the match, to ensure that we have enough money by the time our first match is due. Because again, I think one of the things I really want to make sure is understood is that's not the only project. So we do have other things that come out of the road fund, and that includes the crack seal, the match we need for Chavez Road, any of the other items that we need a match for is coming out
Speed
of there.
humps, resurfacing, all of those, we call them the co-op projects. It's anything that we get to on Keene's road ICIP.
And
Thank
those-
you for doing that, Tammy.
Absolutely. And so now if you go back to page 7 of 7, once we've done all of our operational expenses, that was the $3.1 million. And then we have our capital expenditures of $341,000, and our transfers, our transfer out of $814,000. We have an excess of $283,146 in the general fund.
So Tammy, that number though is through February 28th, correct?
That number is
It's
the ending number.
annualized.
That number is the ending number based on actual expenses through February 28th and annualized through the end of the year.
So if the March, the March 31 number is correct, and then you have an April 30, May 30, and then a June 30. So by July, this number could change significantly. I
Mayor,
think it's going to be
trustees.
even higher, but I'm just,
So it can change. The other thing we have to take into consideration also is all the expenses going out those months as well.
Of course.
So there are projects that we haven't completed that could be hitting as well. But this gives us, but because they're annualized, it gives us a good picture that that number can potentially increase, yes.
sure, but it's still a pretty good number, I mean, when you get right down to it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think Mayor and trustees, as Tammy mentioned in the beginning, most communities are not ending their budget years in the black, that they're breaking even, if that. So we feel really confident and really comfortable having this little bit of wiggle room. Here we are at the beginning of April.
Right.
Things change. We pass this interim budget, but then we bring back the final budget in July. So it just gives us an opportunity to wiggle a little bit and then give you all a discussion period to come up with some projects.
Well, the other thing to consider, all the matches are already in here, right?
Yes.
So if these funds come in, you already have the match. So you're not trying to steal money from July or next year because you've got it already, plus you have the excess. So I think we're in pretty solid shape.
Now, there's one other section we want to go over. I don't know if you want to kind of talk about this and revisit the GRT and the COLA you wanted to come back to, or if you'd like to go over the Rescue Act first. I don't know what makes sense for.
I think it's up to the trustees.
Go over the. Perfect, okay. So going to the second handout that you have, this is the information on the Rescue Act. And we received the Rescue Act after COVID. We received $1,513,69. And that money, we had a meeting a couple years ago deciding how to spend that money and where we wanted to see projects. And so some of these projects have been completed. And so what you have before you is all the projects. We have how much it cost, what we've already spent, and kind of a breakout to show you what we've spent, what we plan on spending by the end of this fiscal year, plans for fiscal year 24, and then some funds that we would like to get some ideas on a plan for. So if you go over to the third from the last column, it says amount spent in fiscal year 23 as of March 31st, 2023. The first number you see there is the total distribution that we received. And then if you look down that column, there are 4 items that we actually already did those projects and we've spent that money. So we spent money on the EMS and fire services. We were able to pay half of their contract last year. And we were able to spend money on the Zoom that we use for our meetings to make sure that we could broadcast that as people were attending from elsewhere. And we spent money on the mobile home park, getting that cleared out, taken care of. And lastly, we purchased water rights. And so looking at what we've already spent, that's $416,000 and some change. And that brings us to 2 items that we plan to spend between April 1st and June 30th of this year. So there are 2 items in red in the next column. We have $350,000 to spend at the Paseo del Norte infrastructure project. So Trustee Lewis, I heard you mention earlier the loan with MRGCD.
So I'll just finish this. We do currently have an agreement with the Mid-Region Council of Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District for a loan to cover the new improved infrastructure changes at Paseo del Norte. In implementing that project, it became apparent that it came with a lot of strings. It required federal procurement processes that we were just not equipped to handle as staff. We have asked the district if we can rescind that agreement. We will be bringing that to you all in the next meeting to rescind that agreement. We are going to continue with the project because we have funding here in the Rescue Act to do water improvement projects, and we didn't need as much for the water rights purchases than we thought. So given that we have this money here that we need to spend in the next 2 years, we are proposing taking that final piece of the Del Norte infrastructure water improvement project out of here and not taking a loan with a 2% interest.
Great.
And the second item in red there is for the raised crosswalks on Chavez Road. And so we have budgeted for 2 of those to go in. So if we completed those projects, that's another $385,000 that we would be spending out of the Rescue Act, which if you look at the last column on your first page there, we would start fiscal year 24 with $711,831. And we have a couple projects that we are proposing to be completed in fiscal year 24, and you can see those at the bottom of your first page. The first one is purchasing additional water rights. We are almost through the process of that, correct? The actual payment will probably come just because of how long it takes in the beginning of the next fiscal year. So that was already money we did budget for to spend on water rights. It's just flowing into the next fiscal year. Then we have $25,000 to boost the the 4th Street Business Initiative, boost the hospitality industry. We have $225,000 for Edgewood Park to plan, design, equip all of the items, the playground equipment at Edgewood Park. And then on the last page, here is where you'll see the second half of the tennis court upgrades. And so that gives us $466,100 for the planned items for fiscal year 24. And as you can see, the last item there is the total left in the Rescue Act that we have $245,000 for discussion as to kind of the that we have that we would like to see if there, what plans or projects you want to see considered for that.
I want to make a comment about all this. I learned last week from a number of towns in New Mexico, small towns, who have spent very little of their ARPA money, the American Rescue Act. And I want to commend our staff and commend the trustees for being aggressive and making sure that we do, in fact, use this money for the benefit of all of our residents before it goes away in less than 2 years. These other towns, if they don't move and try to spend their money on the appropriate purpose, who knows what can happen. So this is really good that we're doing it this way.
So when do we have to spend that last 245, 731?
One more year after next year.
25 in 25?
Right.
Okay.
I have some questions. So going back to the loan for Del Norte Open Space. So are we rescinding the entire loan or partial?
Mayor Trustee Pacheco, we never actually utilized any of the Conservancy District funding. We had already budgeted for a lot of the cleanup and maintenance work, the disking, the concrete removal,
Tree trimming, all
the tree trimming. So we used our own money first. We were about to move forward with the actual irrigation pipeline, and it just became too cumbersome, and it became really clear that it was going to be a very cumbersome process. So we saw that we had this funding that we had set aside for water efficiency. It was already budgeted and already approved by the trustees as a bucket in the Rescue Act. We do need to spend this money. It just seemed like a better idea to forego a 2% interest
So
and
we're rescinding the entire,
Correct.
agreement, but not the project. The project is moving forward. We're just not going to borrow the 300 and change that we needed.
okay.
It was up to 500,000, if you recall, but we didn't need the whole amount.
Got it, got it.
And that is, I'm not following, where is, that 350 is the amount on line 4 of the first page
Correct.
for that? Right. Okay,
That is correct, yes.
okay.
And then another question with regard to the 25,000 for the 4th Street Business Initiative. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is that
Yes.
coming out of the,
Rescue Act. So, Trustee Pacheco, mayors, trustees, you may recall when we first allocated these bucket items, it was for businesses that had had hardship through the pandemic. We were able, through the CARES Act, to give out $1 million to businesses up and down 4th Street and throughout the village.
106 of them, right.
So this remaining 25,000 is here for us to spend on business activities. In the Business and Economic Development Advisory Committee, ideas have come up like putting banners up and down 4th Street for certain events, having a children's art contest to design some banners and signage, to do some additional marketing, to help businesses maybe with streetscape improvements. All kinds of ideas came out of the Business and Economic Development Committee that were summarized in the report that you got last month. We thought we would ask the committee, or ask you all, if we could take some of that 25,000 that remained after already giving out $1 million, if we could use some of that for some of these ideas, to address some of these ideas that came out in the committee.
okay, so the 4 ideas, which I actually brought my little copy here. So we can potentially use that $25,000 to apply to one of these or to some of these, if we wanted to start with just a little of each. I know we talked about, trying to, and you said marketing, trying to brand the village and potentially contract with a public relations firm or a marketing firm to help us get there. That's what we could use this, potentially use this $25,000 for.
Correct.
Okay.
If it could go that far.
What were the others on the list?
So we talked about a cultural center, a village cultural center. We talked about the activities that Ann explained with banners or signage, just some educational activities. Let's see, business support, and that again is signage in concert with the branding campaign. And then, of course, we didn't talk a lot about yet the Village Foundation that we had brought up as an idea to start. And then business recruitment was another hot topic, and just trying to get the right businesses to 4th Street. Excellent.
So do you have ideas about where that 25,000 would go?
So Mayor and trustees, so it would
Not
be.
to all 5 of those.
No, in fact, it's pretty limited what we can spend funds on. businesses that were affected by COVID, by the pandemic. So it, possibly a branding campaign, although that sounds like a pretty expensive proposition, but we could look and see how far it went. For sure, the activities, other kinds of business support, like helping access to capital was one that came out in the survey. Maybe a workshop with Accion or West or one of the microlenders. I mean, those kinds of activities just to help business and give business support.
I see. And is that's also true for the 245,731 on, which is the total left.
Correct.
And so it can only be spent for certain kinds of things.
Correct.
And those are the kinds of things it can be spent for. So for instance, if we want to do, put a heating system in the barn, for instance, or lighting system in the barn, we could not use this for that.
I would have to research that, Mayor, Trustees. There was a little leeway for recreation and public health. So for example, playground equipment, absolutely. It's an absolute allowable expense. A facility upgrade, not certain that would qualify, but I could do some research.
Just a thought. I mean, we all know the barn really needs help more than most of our buildings, and so.
On that note, we could talk about some of the ideas that Trustee Benavides had for the remainder of the funds, and just some of his priority items. But on the barn, I want to say that it is utilized almost every weekend from March to October. So it's very, very popular. It's a really nice, low-cost way to provide an event space.
That's exactly what it is.
For the community. Now, if we put a lot of funding into it, if we winterized it, for example, or put a bank of bathrooms, we might not be able to charge so little. Right now, I think one of the reasons it's so popular is because we only charge $700 a pop, and half if you're a village resident. So, so it's a great opportunity. I mean, it's a great option, a great event option, and it's really popular. And people love the kind of rustic nature of it. Trustee Benavides did have some ideas for some iterative improvements to the barn. For example, a power upgrade, upgrading the electrical, maybe putting a swamp cooler in there so it's a little cooler in the, or some kind of, what's that called, mini split or whatever.
It's a mini split.
Or, so that you could have,
It wouldn't work.
because it's cold there in the winter, which is why we stopped renting it in the winter. And then it's hot in the summer. So we could, something like that. We could talk about bathrooms off-site, not in the facility, because then you'd have to, there's no foundation on that barn. And there's also potential archaeological items underneath the facility. So we could talk about a bank of bathrooms off to the side, some plumbing, heating and cooling, insulation, that kind of thing. That was one of Trustee Benavides's suggestions. He also liked the idea of increasing the police fund, upping it from the 25. He talked about purchase of land, and we are going to hold a public meeting in the next month to bring the public into the decision of what kind of public land we purchase with our bond money. I don't want to get into the specifics of that.
Also, just a note, these are not just for the Rescue Act, because the Rescue Act we could not use, yeah. So these are just some of his other ideas.
These are other ideas.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with the 245,000.
Exactly. I think I'll stop there, because, yeah.
The remaining balance of the fund that the funds that we had, those have to be spent by, again, remind me, 2025?
That's correct.
Within next year's budget.
Okay.
The reason we want to make sure we have kind of a plan now is it's still, we are still seeing, you know, if it's anything involving a contract or anything, the time frame is really what we don't want to come up against really close, because if we don't use these funds by the date, we could potentially have to revert them back to the state. So we're wanting to make sure that we're getting everything done with enough time. We don't have any holdup just because it's that's not on our end. So we want to make sure, that's why we're bringing it to you now, to try and get a good plan for them.
So this is a priority, obviously, to kind of figure out how we spend, because it's money sitting there.
Yes.
That could potentially go away if it's
Could be
not
clawed
used.
back at any moment. It's a Republican Congress, and we just don't know.
So we really need to put a plan in place to spend that 245-ish amount semi-quickly, I think. I mean, it's going to take us a while to spend it through the next budget, but I think we need to prioritize how we're going to spend that. And like Trustee Benavides, I feel like he does about increasing the police fund. I think we've heard loud and clear from our residents and constituents that that's a priority for the village. So I hope that we can, come up with something that will work for the budget and something that we feel we're going to get something for, increasing the budget on that.
And if I could interject, that is an allowable expense in the Rescue Act.
In the Rescue Act. And is there a cap on what, could we spend I'm not saying we're going to, but could we spend the 245,000 on police presence? Is that
There is no cap. You're asking about a cap. There's not a cap to, you have to spend certain amounts, certain places. It just has to fall within the items that they allowed us to spend it on.
okay, and where is that list of items, allowable expenses?
I can get that for you.
Okay, I think that'd be good for all of us
would
to
like to
just
see it.
kind of take a look at.
I think this is a good topic for a trustee meeting
Yes.
where public can hear it, public can come up later on with their input. And, if you present it to us, it's sort of presenting it to the public as to what it can be spent on. My question is, if we committed it all to something that's allowed under the Rescue Act, we can come back and change that at any time, but we show it committed. Is that what we're
Absolutely.
trying to do?
Yes.
Because I feel like it's a little premature to spend it.
Sure.
As, you never know
We've got time.
what's going to happen in the next 6 months, let's say.
Absolutely.
But
yeah, and-
have some kind of commitment, to it,
Exactly.
Yep,
a soft commitment, I guess.
Yep.
To show it's
That can
spent,
be
agreed.
that we could come back.
changed.
And if I could interject, Mayor and trustees, we love this idea of just kind of understanding kind of general buckets and where you would like to see the funding. But with our lobbyist, we're going to be doing a kind of a bigger public input session on the ICIP this year. And maybe at that point in time, and it'll be kind of like August timeframe, maybe at that point in time, we could also ask the public for input on these sort of general bucket areas.
Right.
And we would have some ideas and some fund breakout. Yeah.
Yep, I like that.
I have a question about the archaeological that you just mentioned. Is that over all of Hartnett Park or just exactly where the barn is?
It's my understanding it's mostly in the barn parking lot, where the barn
Barn
is.
parking lot
Barn
and the
parking
barn.
lot, barn. And even it affected where the bathrooms are currently, that little pocket.
And could part of that money be spent on an archaeological investigation?
I'm not sure, I don't
We'd
think
have to
so.
check.
And the reason I ask that is the other things aside that we talked about, the barn, I think is undervalued as far as what we're getting per event. I think we could use it for more, especially if it had improvements. I'd sure want to know where it should be in the long run as opposed to where it is now, if that if there's archaeological ruins or some kind of remnants or artifacts in that part of the world here at Hartnett Park, because that's a big deal.
Can I break in for just a minute? Wasn't there a study done? I mean, that's how we found out that.
Yes.
But it didn't go far enough.
It didn't go far enough, but I mean,
that's what
there's
I'm
already a foundation to start with.
Correct.
Right, but
So
it would.
the study that was completed was actually, I think that was the first time they talked about doing certain improvements. And that study kind of put it to a halt, because if there is stuff under there, then it creates a bigger expense of having to remove it a certain way and preserve things.
SHPO gets involved.
Correct.
My point, though, is that if we have the barn in the wrong place, we need to move it. And it doesn't have a foundation, it is easily moved. Not easily, but it's pretty easily moved. It's a semi-prefab building, which would be movable. And so we need to find out, it has lots of potential for other things, including a community center. And we really want to know if it's in the right place. So that seems to me like a really good investment to do an archaeological study and finish it and find out exactly what's there, so that if we need to move it, we can then think about moving it in the future or not.
Yeah, and maybe we just need kind of a refresher on, my understanding, and of course, you know, it could be completely wrong, was that the barn was placed where it's placed to protect what was found underground. Now, I don't know if that's just something I heard or.
Could be.
Actually, you're closer to the truth, because when the barn was first donated to the village, it wasn't the barn that you have there.
Yeah, that collapsed.
In 2008, there was a vicious windstorm in April, and it demolished what was there. And then the late mayor decided to reconstruct it. And that's how you ended up with what you have right now.
But if, without knowing what's down there,
Can't do anything, right?
we really can't spend any money on it. So we need to know what's down there.
You need to know.
Right.
You do need to know. That's
And mitigation can take many forms. It can mean removal, it can mean covering, but you wouldn't be covering it with foundation and all that sort of
Well,
thing.
you could actually raise it a little bit, I think. It's possible. I don't know how much.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. I think that's an issue that we need to put somewhere on the calendar that we move forward,
Well, and
trying to find out more, so then,
Then we know
Hire-
what.
yeah, the barn sort of keeps coming up now and then, so I think.
hire an archaeological company
Yeah.
to go do
So
it.
if in the next few months, we could say, here, let's plan on hiring an architect, let's find out what that costs.
We at least
If we
know
want to
that.
put it in this budget, we'll have time to put it in this budget, and then we can go from there, because I
Yeah.
think you're right.
Same with the parking lot, actually.
Because I tend to believe it wasn't willy-nilly that they just reconstructed it.
Right.
So I tend to think there's more to the archaeological study than we think there is.
Could be.
And so I think to investigate that first and get back to us would be a prudent way to do it. yeah.
Agreed, and is
Because
that,
it might be all there.
right, sorry I interrupted.
No, that's-
And it could be used with this kind of money? Possibly.
know.
We
I
don't know that yet.
honestly don't know. I don't think
I
so.
don't think so.
There were
But-
some guidelines on, it had to be in certain ways COVID related. That was kind of part of it. And so I don't think so. So we would have to definitely, most likely do that out of the general fund expenses.
However, you recall that we budgeted so beautifully that, we have wiggle room. So, I mean, if that's a project you want to pursue, absolutely, we can go down that path.
I would ask that maybe for next week's meeting, if you can at least give us what's the guidelines for spending Rescue Act money. And then, as soon as we can, maybe get us some detailed information on the Archaeological Act. I mean, that, I guess we could come back, as late as, for the May meeting and insert here, we want some money in the budget. We have time there. So I would say we do that.
I agree.
All right, well, do you have any other?
I was just gonna talk about a couple of the other things that Trustee Benavides talked about. It's not really out of rescue. It was just kind of general comments. I think Tammy mentioned he thought the 2% COLA plus the 3% merit seemed low and should be higher. That was something he didn't want to say in a vacuum. He wanted to have a discussion with you all, but he just couldn't be here today. Just wanted to throw that out. I think we already discussed that. He wanted us to consider bringing our tax rate back up to where it's been, the 1.25. He wanted to talk more about events in general, and that is the kinds of events and the seasonality, I guess, of them, like the Lavender and the Fall Fest and the Matanza and some of these recurring events. He wants more involvement by the village and more regularity. And I have co-op here.
He just said making sure that we are continuing to look at the other roads in the village that need to be improved and continuing with that as we've been in the past. He did mention that. He also mentioned just the east side, making sure that, we're considering them and taking care of them, and then upgrades to Village Hall, office space, bathrooms, just because we seem to be outgrowing kind of this area and the way it's configured. So those were the things that I had.
And then I had one last thing from him on 4th Street. Even though we're only at 30% design and we're kind of halted at this point, he wants us in the next year to show some progress in some way, shape, or form. If it's just restriping it, if it's getting to the 100% design, which we have to do, hopefully by the end of this year, but just some progress on 4th Street.
I have a question about God, what did you say? Sorry. Oh, Lavender Fest. I'm assuming that after, and I don't know what we make on the Lavender Fest as a village. As I remember, it's not much. It's almost not worth it for the village to do it in some ways. Doesn't the Lavender Fest? I've worked on Santa Fe Plaza in the past on my professional side, and they replace the grass and sometimes the irrigation on Santa Fe Plaza 5 times a year because of all the events they have on the Santa Fe Plaza. It's just really hard on that grass and the infrastructure for irrigation. Does that happen to us during Lavender Fest? Do we spend an additional monies after Lavender Fest to replace grass, fix irrigation, whatever it is, because of all the crowds?
Yes, Mayor, Trustees, we do always have a little bit of damage. There's a sprinkler that needs to be fixed and that kind of thing, but overall not too bad. They do a really great job getting the field prepped. They don't irrigate it up, a week up to the event so that there's not, a muddy area. The grass gets some
So it's not a
use
sizable
and wear and
amount
tear, but no.
money.
I mean, we do very well.
Okay.
And they also, the Lavender in the Village pays for as many days as they need to set up, use the barn. It's a weekend event, so they have multiple days of rental. And we get the GRT from the vendors
Okay.
And the exposure.
and the branding.
Could upgrading the irrigation to be more protected during Lavender Fest be something we could use the $245,000 for because it's being used for jobs for people that might have not had the. I might be stretching a little bit.
Could it be used for?
I'm just looking. You know where I'm going. You'd probably know where I'm going too, right?
Yeah, I think that would be stretching it. I'm not sure. Like, again, we can give you the verbiage and all of the different areas that it can be used for, so we can look at that, but I think that Might be stretching it a bit.
Just,
I want
Nice
to
try, though.
ask a question about 4th Street. So I know we want to keep the momentum going and make sure that we're making some progress. Can these funds be used to potentially help pay for Maria's consulting fees if we were to have her housed again on 4th Street to be able to start answering questions and discussing with residents or any interested party about what's happening on 4th Street and just trying to get that communication going again so that it stays very relevant to the community?
I don't believe so. So some of the categories that it can't, like boosting public safety, that's one, but I don't know that her contract could really fit into that. You know, like infrastructure is another one, reinvigorating the economy. So there's certain places, but I don't think that would be one that would fall into.
I think we
However,
see that.
Yes.
Fred's contract is applicable, and we were able to offset a lot of Fred's expenses with Rescue Act funding.
Yes.
so, even if the 4th Street plans get done, we still don't have money to do them and
That's
all that
correct.
stuff. Could we use that money, and we just talked about this a little while ago, to, for instance, fix that asphalt flap near Los Ranchos Elementary that sticks up about 6 inches and things like that, and then remove the striping and restripe at 3 lanes as a safety device to try to give a precursor of what might be in the future to users.
That idea is on the table, George. In fact, we're talking about that even now. Another option is to move forward and spend some of our money on utility relocations, which will have to be done in advance. Because if anybody recalls, when the Water Authority went out there in 2017, they relocated their utilities. They did. But the contractor made a big mistake. He put them in the wrong place and he had to go back out there again. And so we've seen on utility relocation projects unforeseen conditions. So we would be wise to do that ahead of time and do the restriping at the same time. So that's a
And
possibility.
if I could interject, yeah, Mayor and Trustee Radnovich, recall, we have 3.5 million
Right.
to get going.
But I'm
and
talking
we
about
absolutely
this
can do that. I know, I hear what you're saying. I'm just saying that I don't know that we would need Rescue Act funding for that. I mean,
It's a safety.
Trustee Pacheco brought up, new playground equipment at the Hartnett Park. And I mean, there's things that are definitely allowable versus something like this where we would have to kind of make a case. But yeah, you raise a good point.
I'll look
And-
forward to, go on.
Yeah, and just on 4th Street, we will be having a public meeting in May to revisit the 30% and to introduce some of the new ideas that came out of the value planning session. So we will be looking at 4th Street.
I'll look forward to seeing the list of things we can use. 'Cause I
Absolutely.
think without it, it's really hard to.
Yes,
come up with
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah, and we weren't trying to spring it on you now, but just to show you that we do have a balance and we're doing the best we can to whittle that money down and put it to good use.
I'd just like to say thank you to all of you for doing such a great job in putting this together. I mean, I think this was like the smoothest budget, opportunity that I've had since I've been serving. So thank you for being real clear on everything and, providing us the information we need to move forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor, Trustees.
I would like to reiterate that too. I mean, great job, great budget, I feel like. I feel like this whole process is just getting better and everybody's understanding the budget better. Some of them, like me, can't remember 2 months from now that we had this meeting, but I think overall, you guys did a great job, and thank you.
I definitely agree with that. Thank you for doing such a great job. I do have one more thought.
Sure.
And it's not about the 245. Is there anywhere in this budget any money for the old Village Hall?
Mayor and Trustee Radnovich, no. We have funding to demolish the old Village Hall in this year's budget, which we're not going to move forward on. We had wanted to have a whole pocket park there with pickleball and all of that. And we still may move forward with 2 pickleball courts where the old volleyball courts are, because they're getting widely used. People are borrowing the nets and every weekend playing pickleball there, but it's not permanent facilities. And we're getting calls every day for permanent pickleball over at the old Village Hall site, but we would not be touching the old barn, the old facility.
So, and this is not really budget related, but it could be. Did we do a study of the old hall to see if it could just be upgraded as opposed to a total redesign effort?
Mayor, Trustee Radovich, we didn't do a study on preservation per se, but we did have Decker Parish Sabatini come out and look at it. We had a trustee walkthrough. I don't recall if you were involved in that, Trustee Pacheco, but I know Trustee Lewis was, and the mayor, and the last 2 trustees, and didn't see a value in rehabbing the entire facility. But I'm happy to take you out there. And
That'd be
if you've
great. I would
been
like that.
in
'Cause
the facility.
It has struck me that it's just a huge price tag. And architects and other designers tend to look at things in a somewhat insular way sometimes, and there may be reason to look at refurbishing it
Yeah.
instead of replacing it. And the other thing I was going to bring up is, and this maybe I should wait until next week, but I've read a few articles on pickleball courts. We've designed them ourselves, and pickleball courts are noise generators, and there have been quite a few articles in landscape architectural journals about that. And people are actually fighting against pickleball courts in parts of the country now because it's a specific type of sound, and it's a loud sound for true pickleball, and that's right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So if 1 or 2 courts being used temporarily is one thing. You put 8 courts together, and that may be a very different thing. And so I think we need to think long and hard about that.
Absolutely.
Just saying.
If I could jump in about the price tag of the old Village Hall.
Yeah.
That, it's probably a lot more now because we got that quote before the, sort of right in the middle of the pandemic, but it was before all the construction costs went up. But it was like $1.2 million for a brand new facility. And it's a very simple design. It's really just a shell with some lockers for all of the users. It was really very simple, and it was kind of cool, I thought. But we have sort of shelved that. Happy to share that with you.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
But imagine if, as just an example, you could, make sure it was shored up, replace the windows, put in insulation, and cover it. It may be cheaper than that to just,
Possibly.
not remodel, but
Right.
make it
Usable.
usable.
Yeah, I mean, it would need new flooring, new HVAC, new windows, all the asbestos out of the ceiling, new insulation, probably a new roof. So you add those up. I just want to also say that it's a really sweet little facility. I really like it. It's very campy, and it's really underutilized. But it has bathrooms, it has heat. I mean, it's actually a great facility versus this one that has none of the above. Just saying.
I'll be interested to hear your comments after you tour it.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, maybe, yeah.
So,
At this time, I would like to entertain any public comment.
Mayor Trustee, I'm sorry.
You're not done yet, I'm sorry.
No, there's one thing I want to make sure we discuss. Just the 2 items coming back to regarding the GRT reallocation. If we want to do that, a different percentage. And same thing with the COLA, if we're okay with it, if we're wanting to look at something else, because those 2 decisions will definitely require me to do some more work before I get this before you. So I want to get
So,
those addressed.
so you want something like today?
Yes, and it's not necessarily an absolute final, but if I need to rework any numbers, I need to know, if you want to leave the reallocation the way I have it presented for you for now, that's fine. If you want me to look at dropping that or anything, there's certain things that I will need to have some information on just to present you with an interim budget at the meeting, because that'll affect numbers.
I do have one more question, trustees, Mayor. When we project, say, 5% or 6%, that varies by employee, correct? So we'll have 2% across the board or whatever we decide the cost of living is. And then that other amount could be higher for some employees, lower for others, et cetera. We do that as part of our process of giving raises and that kind of thing?
That is correct, and there's two different factors in that. The first one is it varies because it's a percentage based on their current rate, but also it varies depending on when their annual evaluation is. So if your annual evaluation is in August, you'll see that sooner. If it's not till April, you're not going to see that merit base till the end of the fiscal year. But those factors are considered into when I put the payroll budget together, where those changes hit, all of that is considered.
Got it.
Mayor, Trustees, Tammy, I did get word late Friday afternoon from the city of Albuquerque, who oversees our benefits package. And once again, we are getting an increase. So that increase is 2.5% on our medical. We had a 6% increase last year and a 4.5% the previous year. So just to consider that, if you would, as part of the COLA, and when you think about that, because last year we did get the 2%, but then we got hit with a 6% increase. So that kind of negates that somewhat. So I'd like you to consider that.
And the village doesn't pay that. The staff's paying their own medical, right?
Staff and the village, we do a 50-50 split.
Okay.
So the village will take an increase as well.
And could you repeat those one more time? I'm sorry, the list you just.
The increase to our medical will be 2.5.
Yeah.
Last year, we had 6.5, and the previous year was 4%.
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that. Thanks, Danielle.
Do the trustees have any additional comments or suggestions or ideas?
Thoughts on the reallocation to start, maybe? Thoughts on the reallocation?
Can we ask for public comment and then come kind of circle back to this? Would that?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
We have one person in the audience. Would you like to say anything? Please come forward. And you have as much time that is reasonable.
Do we have anyone online that can?
It's not Zoom. It's not a Zoom meeting. It's only being streamed.
Got it.
Thank you, Mayor, trustees. Just a couple comments to add to what you were talking about, particularly on Joe Craig, I'm sorry, 505 Calle del Pajarito Northwest. The old Village Hall, Alan and I, Trustee Lewis and I have talked about this in the past. It potentially could be listed as a historic structure. Dr. Bill Dodge, who we worked with on the Schulte House, had some thoughts on it. He lives over in the Asari Hacienda over at Second Osuna, part of UNM. Potentially there might be money. It might be more headache. So I don't know. But he worked on the Hobbs Air Force Base, which you probably never heard of. But these are World War II barracks or whatever. But he thought there would be some money. I don't know. That's just a comment. Second of all, our great book, Shining River, Precious Land, by Kit Sargent and Mary Davis, which we have a copy of. The Albuquerque Museum has more copies. They have the rights to by the way, to the verbiage on that. We have the pictures here someplace that we need to preserve. They're in a cardboard box somewhere. I saw them back a number of years ago. Very important for our history. The archaeological study that you were asking about is in that book. That's the basis for the book with the Maxwell Museum. It was funded by the Village of Los Ranchos. Kit Sargent was Arnold Sargent's wife. She did an archaeological study. We had a 40-house plaza, buildings and plaza that the 1903 flood took out. So somewhere, we're sitting on it here. I believe the barn is sitting on it, and it may be, I believe the chapel might have been across the street. We've got a picture of a chapel here in the front lobby. I'm not sure that's our chapel. I keep thinking it's the Our Lady Mount Carmel up on Candelaria. You worked on the Bukeki. That church got wiped out. I think that was after or before somewhere. But anyway, major flood took all this out. We have there is a study. The Maxwell Museum has a lot of the artifacts and the study, so that might be a basis for us to look at. It was a pretty substantial plaza with stone, with a stone plaza, but it's in the book and the whole study's available. That's all. Thanks. Thank you for your time here.
Okay, trustees.
I'll take the lead. You know, I'm fine with the reallocation on the road fund as you've presented it. I'd like more time to think about the compensation and the COLA. You've given us a lot of facts and a lot of information and a lot of numbers, and I don't know if it's something you would like to hear from us by the end of the week or something, but I would like a little more time to try to really consider what's fair, so.
I agree. I think trying to make a decision right here and right now with regard to that is going to be a little difficult. I think if it's okay that we do take the week before week's end to just kind of provide you our feedback and direction, I think that would really be helpful.
I would have to agree, and especially with the drop in GRT, that particular issue, and then also the potential increased wages. I'd like to take a little time to consider that.
If you could, it doesn't have to, you know, obviously no names associated with it. Is it possible to send us one or two, somebody's package? I mean, you know, when you talk about medical going up 6%, is that, you know, what percent of that is of the compensation package or of what somebody makes? You know, if they're only paying, you know, $50 a month or something, then it's going up.
So Mayor, trustees.
So if there's a way to sort of see what that impact is, you know, understanding what percentage and what kind of dollar that impact translates to, I'd appreciate.
Mayor, trustees, what I can do for you is I can provide you with our rate sheet for the all of that, so you can see it splits out the total, the village portion, the employee portion, and it's bi-weekly, so it comes out twice a month. I can provide you with that, and I can also provide you with, now that I know that what the increase is, this budget does not have those increases to that, I can redo that portion, and I can send you a spreadsheet that's just the payroll as a total, showing you what it looks like with those increases, and I can also provide you with the different COLA amounts. I can provide you with what the impact is to the budget and the percentage. I can provide that to you by, I would say, probably tomorrow. And that way you have the week to look at that.
And does that squeeze you as far as the budget goes before our meeting next week?
No, Mayor, trustee, that will not, because this won't be presented to you until the May budget.
May,
so it just allows me, it gives me some time to get everything in. And then once you make your decision, if you do it by the end of the week, then I have time to make sure I've got everything covered and ready to get for the packet. So that does not squeeze me.
And that could include trustee Benavides as well.
Yes, I will provide that to all of you.
So what do we need to do today? Is there anything before we leave? Do we need to say, yes, we kind of agree on the direction and what the proposed changes are?
Mayor and trustee Pacheco, this is just a working session, so just going back and forth, deciding what we're talking about. There is no decision today. There are no votes, so it's just merely working on the budget and seeing what we can adjust from what was presented in front of you today.
Okay, great.
With that, I do want to adjourn the meeting. I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I need a second.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It is 12:06 PM. Thank you. Great work session.
How come our clock says 12:10?
It's off. This is the right time. It's off. Oh, goodness gracious. All right.